Hello, 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 everyone. Are we live? Is this working? Hello? All right, yes. I don't know why it's not showing me the update. This is our first time doing this, so I want to thank you all for being patient with us because this is an exciting new piece of technology. So this is the Dominique Show. Welcome. It is our first live Zoom event. We did do a live show for the primary results on Super Tuesday, if you recall. It was just like a month after the show went live here on the YouTube channel, and that was in Los Angeles. And thank you to all of you who were there for that in person and who tuned in. What a wild ride the last few months has been. We decided to do this live show because, this is a crazy night. I'm from New York, and a lot of you are watching the New York races. We're going to be touching on other races too, but this race in particular, in New York, there's several challengers, several progressives that are running. A lot of folks who are running against the establishment, and this is a part of the country that has a tremendous opportunity to flip seats, to make them progressive, to take on the machine, because New York is, if there's anywhere where a machine is holding its grasp, it is New York. And AOC, of course, showed the world that not only can progressives take on the machine and win, she took on two machines. She took on the Bronx machine and the Queens machine, and as a Queens girl myself, that is no easy feat. So we're going to be monitoring these races. Of course, doing this in COVID has only given folks nervousness as progressives, we know that our power is in the manpower. It's in knocking on doors. It's on grassroots organizing. It's on putting on events, small dollar donations. But when you have the establishment flooding in a ton of money, and they're flooding in a ton of money into these districts to buy ads and media, it makes it really hard to compete. Especially if you can't go outside and you're wearing your masks and you can't do typical door-to-door canvassing. So we have a really exciting show. I am going to have to apologize because part of hosting when you don't have a production team in studio with you is you're talking to the guests and, confirming that they're able to make it in. So let me just run through some of the guests that we have on the show today, and I'll tell you a little bit about who these folks are if you're not aware. The first person who's going to be joining me all night is my co-conspirator, Dominique. She's going to be joining us in a few minutes. She's the political director of Matriarch. And the reason I asked her to join is not only is she a brilliant political director and organizer, master at field, but she's working with our Matriarch candidates, two of whom are in New York right now running. But she lives in the district that Jamal Bowman, which I'm sure many of you are following, she is in his district, and she's extremely familiar with the dynamics there, as well as the dynamics of many of these races that we're going to be discussing tonight. So I'm very proud that we're going to have Dominique on. I'm looking forward. She's going to join us in a few minutes. But just giving you a little bit of the rundown as of right now, and things could change at any minute because it's election night. You never know. We're going to have a few different candidates join us. We're going to, in a few minutes, as polls close at 9 p.m. Eastern. We will have Lauren Ashcraft, who's running against Maloney in New York City. She's running on the east side of New York, parts of Brooklyn, and a good chunk of Queens, Western Queens, Astoria, including Roosevelt Island as well. We're going to have Maloney who's running against, I believe, one of the most conservative members of the House. His name is Tom Suozzi. He's a Democrat, so when I say conservative, I mean on the spectrum of Democrats. She's running against him. He caucuses with Republicans. She's an extraordinary candidate. We've had her on the show before. She's running in Long Island and parts of Queens. And then we'll have Lindsey Boylan, who is challenging Jerry Nadler on the west side of Manhattan, because we're getting really local here. I wish I could share maps and do the whole, hologram thing. Maybe that's the next stage we're at. So that's Lindsey Boylan's running a very spirited race. That is getting feisty. I don't know if you've been following that one. Then we're going to have, we might have Smelis Lopez, who's running in the Bronx. We're trying to lock that down. We shall see. She is a Matriarch candidate as well. And I want to be taking you guys, your questions live. So make sure to tweet at us at The Nomiki Show, at Nomiki Const, at all of our guests. If you're not already doing so, click subscribe, like, and share. This show, as you know, is really fueled by these shares. It's fueled by the patrons who have kept this show alive for this last few months as we've launched right before COVID. So make sure to do that. Hit the likes, the shares, and the alerts. And just before we get off to a great start, I want to show you these mugs that we finally brought in. We got some fancy mugs and stickers and totes, which are down there. I'll show you in a minute. But we have that up in our shop now. So definitely go and check us out. If you're a patron, you know all about it already. But I'm just going to pull up all of the coverage right now so we're on top of everything. How am I sounding? I'm going to look at you guys for some feedback. Sound good? I am reading the chat. I appreciate you. I'm not reading all the chat, but I will be monitoring this. We're going to have some members of our team on here as well, monitoring as the show goes on. Sound is fine. Good, because I have air conditioning on the background. It's very, very hot in here. So we'll also have some experts on New York politics, organizers in New York. These are people that I've gotten to know over the years. Some are younger, and I think that's really important because so much of this energy, so much of this momentum is coming from the Zoomers and the younger millennials. I'm an older millennial. But, we have some great minds who are going to come on, talk about the technology that people are organizing with, talk about what it means to organize in the movement during COVID. They're going to talk about these districts. Some have been very involved in the race. some of these races. So we'll have some really interesting dynamics. All right. I am just confirming some stuff right now. Okay, so polls close at 9 p.m. Eastern. When Dominique joins us, we'll talk a little bit about what we expect in terms of results. Because so much of this election has been framed by mail-in voting, how mail-in voting was going to work. A lot of folks have left New York City in particular. Obviously, we have New York State, and Governor Cuomo has been probably not the best advertiser when it comes to, he hasn't, been the best advertiser when it comes to good democracy, but, we do what we can to make sure that we pressure him. And Dominique has just joined, Dominique Shumanova, political director of Matriarch, looking sharp. Hey, Dom, I'm going to take you off mute. Is that okay? And baby Clara, who's making her appearance on our show. Dominique, you are still muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Hello. Hi, how are you? Clara was actually on your show when she was in utero, when she was born during the pandemic. So she's actually made an appearance before. Hi.
Hi, Dom. Can you do me a favor? Can you just lower your volume a little bit? You're coming in a little bit louder on your end. It's just in the settings.
Yep. How's that?
See, we are a live show. We can do this kind of thing. So Dominique, I was telling everybody just as we get started here that you live in the district that Jamal Bowman's running in. That's going to be a big topic of conversation tonight. We have Andam joining us, who was in that race just a few weeks ago, ran a very spirited campaign. So tell me, what does it feel like on the ground there?
There's definitely momentum building. We feel the eyes of the nation on us here in New York 16. I feel like part of that is the incumbent just running like the worst campaign that the world has ever seen. Right. But we also are a majority minority district and one of the last ones in the country that's never been represented by a person of color. And we're in this moment where a lot of people are getting engaged for the very first time around this race. And starting to pay attention to things like corporate money, and draw that line where you don't get to call yourself a progressive when you take more money than 144 House Republicans from arms dealers, right, and weapons manufacturers, right? We have these incumbents that have been in office. It's like a lifetime position. My aunt was actually involved with Eliot Engel's original election campaign. I was 4 years old. So it's been literally an entire generation. And I think the things that were fine in 1989 and 1999 and 2009, we're just drawing the line now as far as who gets to call themselves a progressive. So the race has been very aggressive. There's been a lot of mailers. I think that part of that is because you can't rely on the traditional voter contact. We can't wear out our shoes, right? The way AOC famously did. Can't just knock all the doors. So there's been an overabundance of these big, fancy, glossy mailers hurling horrible accusations, in either direction. So, Eliot Engel is going to be tough to beat because he is, unlike these open seats, like in New York 15 or New York 17, where you have a lot of different candidates who are likely to split the vote, you have a much lower win number. So if you get 10,000 votes, you can win. Eliot Engel's got 22,000 loyal voters, right? So unless you, and speak of the devil, we're joined by Andam Gebrigorgas. How did I do, Andam? Are you?
So we were just joined by Amanda Frankel and Andam Gebrigor. Can I say his name right? Gebrigorgas. I have to be very good about these
things. I think that was better than me, actually. I am Amanda.
Amanda, there you are. You look great. And Andam, here you are. How's your sound?
Hello.
This is a new thing, so we're playing it out.
Yeah.
So Amanda was also running for Congress in this cycle. So we have now two 2020 New York congressional challengers on. And both of you at a certain point in the campaign decided to drop out, right? So we could, I don't know if in both of your cases, it was so that we could consolidate behind somebody and maybe have a better chance of taking out the incumbent or for personal reasons. But I think everyone would agree that this is one of the toughest cycles just ever known to man in which to run for office, especially as a progressive with the pandemic and everything else.
So Amanda, first off, you're working with Reach now, right?
Yeah, I joined the Reach team. So I left my race back in October, which
It's funny, I say that all roads lead back to Dominique because I feel like everything I've done in the last year has come from her. I met Andom for the first time around a year ago at a progressive happy hour that Dominique said we should both go to. Dominique introduced me to Reach, where I am now working as our head of client success. She's introduced me to you, which is why I'm here now. So
what's Reach for those of us who don't know?
Yeah, so Reach is
Such a fan.
Reach is an explicitly progressive tech company here in the space. We build a really awesome tool that's both a relational and digital organizing, and hopefully one day we can get back out in person canvassing tool. We work with tons of progressive challengers up and down the ballot, including a ton that are up here in New York tonight, as well as Charles Booker in Kentucky. And so we're really excited to be part of a movement that's providing tech to some of these really awesome progressive primary challengers.
And you were running in Manhattan against Nadler as well? Is that?
Yeah, so I lived on the Brooklyn side of the district cool. in the Borough Park area, but yeah, I was running in New York's 10th congressional district.
Very cool. So Andom, you were running for most of the last year. you got out of your race how recently?
June 1st, the day before the hot mic moment.
So to remind everybody who's
famous,
not famous, but we also live in a New York bubble. So for those of us who don't know about the hot mic moment, Andom, you were running also against Elliot Engel. It was a very spirited race. You did, I mean, I've been watching you very closely, very impressive race. Both of you, very, very impressive. So it's great to see that we have this bench of brilliant-minded progressives who know how to organize and articulate the ideas that so much we've had a lot of difficulty, I'd say, as a movement articulating in a way that moves people that may not necessarily be in our circle. So, Andom, what inspired
Elliot Engel makes it easy.
He does, yes.
One of my favorite hobbies.
So the hot mic moment, so it was Tuesday, June 2nd, and there was a racial justice rally in the Bronx. This is around 8 or 9 days after George Floyd's murder. And the Bronx Borough president was basically organizing speakers, and Elliot Engel was not going to be able to speak because there were just so many speakers that were there. And he uttered the now famous line, "If I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't care." Now, in Elliot's defense, I think when he says I wouldn't care, he's not talking about, like, I don't care about racial justice, or I don't care about,
should have known better.
People of color. Yeah. But
rookie move.
Yeah, totally, a huge gaffe. I mean, even if you're taking it at his word, where he's saying that he's referring to his speaking time, it still shows that he's a self-serving politician who's making it all about himself. In this moment where it shouldn't be about him at all. So yeah, and that you just see the headlines. So many people, especially on social media, they're not reading the article; they're just seeing the headline. 31-year incumbent says, "If I didn't have a primary, I wouldn't care." And then that was Bowman's highest fundraising. He had like 3 highest fundraising days, like back to back to back, because AOC endorsed him the next day.
Well, he raised $107,000, I feel like, just that day of the hot mic moment.
Wow.
I mean, just the visual of like this old Bronx boys club, literally in the middle of a pandemic, no masks on, shoulder to shoulder, like jostling for the mic. It's just so passé. It's not of this moment, right? And it's not of the future. It's not, I don't think, what this moment calls for, or the sorts of leaders. And, the guy was in his Maryland home quarantined. That's fine. He's over 70. It makes sense. But if you're able to be like shoulder to shoulder with Ruben Diaz, like you can also be, more hands-on in the district. I understand that he's in Washington, D.C., but he'd also not been in the district for the entire duration of the pandemic and sort of shows up in the district with this infamous moment. So.
Well, and there were also lies around it. There would be times where he would have, Jamal Bailey or other folks in the state Senate or state assembly supposedly supposed to be at events with Elliot Engel. And, there would be these like remarks where it's like, oh yeah, Elliot Engel was passing out X, Y, and Z. And then when someone would follow up, they'd be like, oh, actually, no, it was just people affiliated with Elliot Engel who were actually doing these things.
Do you feel like this means that Jamal obviously has more of a shot than he did before you dropped out? Does this make it more worthwhile, your sort of martyrdom of your campaign? Because when you dropped out, I honestly still thought that it was almost impossible to beat Elliot Engel, even if you drop out and you're still on the ballot and there's still 2 other challengers on the ballot. I still believe that numerically it's an uphill battle to get those 23,000 votes or whatever you need to outdo, the loyal Angle voters. But do you feel now like it's justified, like you're vindicated in the decision that you made because now Jamal's like really within striking distance?
Yeah, in some ways, yes, I'm 100% with you on that. Emotionally, I think that even adds a degree of ambivalence to the decision. But like looking at really what we're on the precipice of thinking of a broader sort of left movement. When I dropped out of the race, I really thought that Engel was 80 to 90% likely to win. From our internal polling numbers, from when I was looking around the district. But now I'd really put it at a toss-up, maybe even a slight lean to Bowman.
Wow, that's amazing. So it really was a turning point, and AOC endorsing was a turning point. I mean, your experience just even through COVID, and Amanda speaks to this as well because you've both been organizing through this in different ways, this crazy moment. I mean, was that because even they knew he was vulnerable, right? Like they knew that this is a man similar to Crowley, lives in another state, doesn't show up, very conservative, gets away with kind of riding on his name ID. Did you feel that during COVID, it kind of made you feel hopeless that there wasn't a path? I remember hearing that with other progressives. That's why I asked for both of you, because you're both, working through this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it was both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge was, we had our field game was our strongest sort of effort, and also just with any insurgent challenger, that's really the way in which we make our dent in a race is through field. And for us, our campaign specifically, we had collected the most petition signatures out of all the challengers by like a significant amount. So we were feeling really, really strong about that. But once it moved to digital, money matters a lot more, which is always sort of a challenge. We thought that we could be strong against Representative Engel because, I don't know if you've seen his graphics at all that have been coming out with these endorsements. Digital is just not his strong suit. So, I knew that we could, dominate him on Instagram and Facebook and all of those things, just in terms of the content that we were putting out. But in terms of Jamal, that's where we were like, all right, this is going to be a little bit difficult for us in that space. So, we tried to have like a daily show, and we had, we tried to be innovative, but it's just like a very difficult environment for a challenger to work in.
Yeah, and your graphics at least didn't come from Microsoft Paint like Representative Engel's. I didn't even know you could still get Microsoft Paint, but it looks like you still can.
Amanda, I'm wondering, what I like about Reach partly is that you guys have just continuously evolved and found new features. And part of the reason that you've been able to do that is because you've been in such close contact with the campaigns. I felt like I could just text you or text your counterparts whenever I've been on a campaign if I have an idea, if I'm stuck on something, and there's been this constant evolution. And then what I've seen recently in the last few months is that it's been a really rapid evolution of new features, of new ways to use it, to do mutual aid, to check in on people, to use it through social media, and to kind of make up for that traditional wear out your sneakers style, even that we were using Reach for, right? We were at parties, we were in the streets, we were at events using Reach, and then Reach also had to adapt really rapidly. How do you feel like the voter contact changed just the entire way of campaigning since March?
I mean, I have to, of course, like agree with Anam here that like, we win progressive victories on the ground. And I mean, we've seen, from everywhere, from like local city council races here in New York to even presidentials that run really strong ground game, is that in-person interaction with candidates and with their surrogates and with excited organizers who get volunteers and continue to keep them engaged really matters. And so when we're organizing through social distancing, it's not just that we're losing the ability to talk to voters in person, it's that we're losing the ability to create that organizing momentum that comes from volunteers coming together and interacting with their organizers and seeing their candidate out on a street corner. And so I'll say, a lot of the ways like we focus on involving is if we're in a situation where we can no longer get out in the field, it's how do we recreate the field in digital spaces? And one of the things we've talked about frequently, and we've been looking at a lot with a lot of our clients, particularly here in New York, is what does the field look like in the digital world? Because relational is important, and you can make sure that your active progressives or active Democrats turn out and vote. But the ability to break into new communities in a digital space without large fundraising dollars is particularly limited. And so we've been playing with kind of some new ideas around like digital crowd canvassing. And so seeking out people in online spaces where they didn't used to be political, but are now, frankly, because our society is political now. People are worried about unemployment. They're worried about their healthcare. They're worried about housing. And so, random Facebook groups for, Bushwick in Brooklyn that used to just talk about like community gatherings or new restaurants are people commiserating about how to apply for unemployment and, worrying about how they're going to continue through like a crisis that's, both economic and a health crisis, and then systemic issues that are destroying the lives of like Black and brown New Yorkers. And so people are talking about that in places that weren't political, and people want candidates that are ready to stand up for them. And I think that just being able to get into those spaces and let them know that they have amazing choices is really important.
And you guys only work with people that don't take corporate money, is that right? So
yeah,
you have that same, that's your line in the sand, right? So you're working only with progressives, is that right?
Yeah, so in any primary, you have to fit a set of progressive values that are oriented around human rights, anti-racism, complete, not just non-discriminatory, but fighting any kind of discrimination, along with not taking any corporate money or corporate PAC money. Once we reach a general stage, if it's a Democrat versus a Republican, that's slightly different, but no corporate Democrats are allowed to use reach in a primary.
Amanda, are they using it specifically for like mutual aid type of organizing? Is that how it's sort of shifted? I mean, we've noticed that with just some of our candidates at Matriarch and candidates we've interviewed, that their way of being able to campaign and connect with their community, and of course it aligns with their platforms, and you too. I mean, if you've experienced that while you were campaigning, was it through mutual aid?
I mean, just speaking from our side of things, we have seen a lot of campaigns pivot of, instead of collecting data about who supports us, is how do we collect data about people who need access to groceries or who need more information about unemployment. The thing with us is we work with tons of really amazing progressive challengers, but we also work with nonprofits as well, particularly people that are doing things like census organizing. And so we've seen, people continue, particularly through social distancing, getting things like census forms filled out has been difficult. So people have been using that outreach, but particularly here in New York, there's a lot of really awesome mutual aid efforts that have been going on.
Amanda, I'm just dying to know, have you endorsed in your race?
Like, not publicly, no. I think
you
that
could,
one of the
so Would you like to endorse in your race?
Well, so I'll say, I've donated to the Lindsay Boylan campaign personally. I donated $25. So what I'll say, one of the things here in New York that I think like we're really struggling with as a progressive movement, which actually wasn't the reason I left my race, I left for family related reasons, is that there's not consolidation and coordination in a way that can disrupt incumbents. And so I just want to like make sure it's said tonight that, the way New York 16 changed is because of this guy we have right here on the call. And if we see like an amazing progressive victory, I think that like a whole lot of credit goes to Anam for like what he's done in recognizing how he could be like a greater part of the movement. And there's a lot of consolidation that needs to happen on the far left, I think, to continue to push these victories. But I think that was a huge part of the tide changing in New York 16 is people not having a split. Even though I know, like I mentioned, like Anam and I met really early on, like we were sitting in a bar drinking $4 drinks, which we found somewhere in New York, talking about like early campaign struggles. So yeah.
When did you launch your campaigns? I don't think people understand like how much of your life a campaign takes up.
Amanda, when did you launch yours?
I launched mine in publicly the beginning of May of last year. And I withdrew in October. So I didn't have the full, sprint into the craziness, but you announced around the same time, right?
Yeah, a couple of weeks after, June 12th, I announced, yeah. I like remember the exact day. It's just like, so, yeah. And
so for people who don't know what it's like, when you decide to run, what is like the process? I know this is silly, but people ask these questions all the time, and I think you guys are great, communicators as to what it means to step up and run, especially if you don't have that background, if you're not part of the machine, if you're a challenger. It's daunting.
For me, unrelated to the race itself, my girlfriend of 3 years, she and I broke up about like 3 weeks before I announced, which in many ways, I can't even imagine having gone through the campaign with sort of the struggles that we were having at the time when we broke up. But you know, I was living at home. Financially, it's just there are a lot of things that one has to consider. I know, I believe it was Nabila Islam who was talking about this a lot, right? About healthcare and whatnot. So financially, I was living at home. I didn't have to deal with New York City rent. I was in Mount Vernon, still enjoying my mother's cooking, and not having to worry about any expenses. But at the same time, it was a year where I'm not earning any income, and we didn't even see it really like fully through. Like when I think of June 23rd, looking back at June 12th, like this is not what I imagined June 23rd would look like. But at the same time, I definitely feel liberated in a lot of ways. I'm looking at today in sort of with a lens that I would have never imagined I would have be looking at it, but also a lens that's really freeing, and being able to analyze the race in a way that is maybe more impartial than I would have otherwise. But speaking to the point, it is so all encompassing. Dominique was one of the people who I reached out to very early on in the campaign through a mutual friend. As Amanda said, all roads anywhere in New York lead back to Dominique when it comes to this stuff. But you can have all the preparation. I did a PCCC training. I spoke to Dominique a lot. I mean, you can have all the toolkits in front of you in the preparation, but there's nothing like actually going through it. And being able to see really just all of the different things that one has to manage, and the people also. Me, I was a teacher, so I was used to dealing with young people and managing classrooms. It's not the same as managing a team, and being the face of an organization in a campaign. Extremely vulnerable. There's just so much to it, and I think looking back at this year, even just today, I feel a lot of pride in what we were able to accomplish, regardless of the outcome.
You should definitely feel that pride. I mean, all eyes are on this district. It's pretty extraordinary.
It's a freaking proxy war.
Okay, so can we talk a little bit about that? Just we're gonna have another guest jump on. You guys are welcome to stay around. We can have a full house. It could be like a CNN panel minus David Axelrod and the neo-Nazis that they like to put on, just for fair and balanced. But really, like there is a proxy war. It's a very serious proxy war between the establishment. But one of the things that we've discussed on our show a lot is just how the coalitions are really what make a campaign the strongest, and you have to raise a lot of money. You still have to raise a lot of money to be able to be competitive in these races. Probably not as much as like John Ossoff does in his congressional, but you still have to raise enough money to get your name out there. And the sooner the better, because that's more time you get your name out there. So just from your perspective, you raised a lot of money. It was very hard work, but how important was that coalition? And can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think even just from our campaign's perspective, because we had our IDs, we had our petition signatures. We were like, look, we have this on the ground to be able to have a victory. But at the same time, Jamal was able to consolidate a lot of the progressive organizations locally and then also nationally, which lended him a degree of credibility when it came to actually being able to speak to media and just being able to articulate the viability of his campaign. That even though within our campaigns, we're like, look, we have quantitative indicators that we're going to be doing all of these things, like we can actually win. But that was a challenge that we had. But once we suspended and everyone was able to look at the race, and even though, again, Sammy Ravello and Chris Fink are also challengers in this race who have continued to run, people very much saw the race as a representative angle against just Jamal, and the ideologies that they themselves espouse could not be more different on just in terms of even just the way in which they speak about their ideas and the way they articulate them. Representative Engel is just sort of very much status quo. There's not really urgency to a moment. Forget climate change, forget coronavirus. It's like, I'm going to bring home the bacon. That's the language that he always uses. And, Jamal really speaks to the exigencies of the issues that are at hand for one of the most socioeconomically diverse districts in the country, a district that has, when you think of the stereotypes of Westchester, which again, Dominique and I are from a city which really bucks the stereotypical trend before Dominique moved, but we're from a city that bucks the stereotypical trend of Westchester, that is it's all very diverse and also has a lot of socioeconomic diversity. Then there's also the Bronx, which has deep pockets of poverty as well. So in this district, you really need someone who's going to be able to speak to all of the needs and the priorities and the values of people. And Representative Engel really struggles with that. So looking at the proxy war that exists right now, it's really in many ways about the future of the Democratic Party. It's in this moment right now, thinking about police brutality, coronavirus, really just marked changes when we're looking at like the future of our country just in general, how we're looking at public health and how we're looking at police brutality. Again, there couldn't be more of a stark contrast in the two of them. What's been interesting, and hey, Melanie, good to see you. What's been interesting is that the Democratic majority for Israel, and even Representative Engel himself, he said Jamal Bowman is anti-Israel, which has been really, really fascinating because Jamal has not really talked about Israel that much throughout the race. He's mentioned conditioning aid and he's spoken about foreign policy, but he has not really been, it has not been one of his like main attack points in terms of Representative Engel. That was one of the things that I was very much attacking him on, as someone who supports BDS and has taught in Palestine. So Jamal, it didn't matter what he did. It didn't matter what he said about Israel. It didn't matter what he said about foreign policy. These attacks were going to happen. And for those of us who live in Westchester, we're receiving 5 to 7 mailers a day from Engel that are just hammering home that Jamal is basically an anti-Israel criminal at the same time. So it's just like, it's been really bad over these last couple weeks here.
It's horrifying to see how much money is flooded in the right wing.
Do you feel like there's racial undertones to that? And then I want to say hi to Melanie too. Melanie DeRigo, it's your election day. I felt like a lot of it is just dog whistle stuff. Like I just was calling some very well-meaning progressive people out today that have like Black Lives Matter signs, but then I just feel like they hold him to a very different standard. And I see this with women candidates as well, where, I don't know if I can trust him. I don't know. And like it has these really implicit bias overtones. Did you feel that as a candidate in this race? Do you feel that that's an issue now for Jamal?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't feel it personally. It's very rarely does, when you're interacting with someone face to face, is something like that going to show itself. But as a candidate who sometimes, wave the mailers, right? As a candidate who would sometimes hear critiques that others would have of Jamal, and people would be like very willing to open up to me about that. A lot of times I'm like, I could very much get along with sort of the pro-Ondom sentiment that it seems like you're trying to speak to. But at the same time, when they would be critical of Jamal, I'm like, it sounds a little bit racialized. And certainly with DMFI and Avanci, they have been definitely weaponizing
What's
implicit
that? I'm sorry.
a Democratic majority for Israel and Avanci, the super PACs that have been, DMFI, I think, has put in about $1.5 million. And I think, and NORPAC has put, that's a pro-Israel.
The paid for buy. Make sure if you're getting mailers wherever you are in the country that you always look for the paid for buy, because by law you have to write who paid for it. And you might be saying, why did the campaign put this out? And they're going to say it's an independent expenditure. It had nothing to do with us. We take no responsibility for what's being put out in our name. And in the Engel race, we've seen millions and millions and millions of dollars of things put out that he's able to say my hands are clean.
And they're not helping him. They're not helping him at all. Yeah.
So just because the only reason I say this is Melanie, it's election day for Melanie. So she's sitting here, Melanie DeRigo, and everybody stick around to, if you have to jump, no worries. This is a very casual situation. If you want to have a drink, I decided to get myself some kombucha. So feel free. It's a little later where you guys are.
Gin and tonic.
There you go. Melanie DeRigo, she's been on the show before. She's one of our matriarch candidates. We're so proud to be working with her. She's running against Tom Suozzi, who is a Democrat who, I mean, when we say dino, we mean like all-in dino. He caucuses the Republicans, and she's just an extraordinary candidate that we have gotten to know so closely over the last, almost a year at this point. But Melanie, how are you feeling today? This is a weird day, right?
It's a weird day. It's certainly not what I expected. A year ago or so, a little less than a year ago, when I jumped in this race. We've been on autopilot all day. So this is the first time I think that I'm actually sitting and focusing on something else other than voter outreach. So I don't know. It's exciting. Last night I sort of let the feelings wash all over me, and we just had so many supporters all over the district just pouring out to us. So many young people thanking me for running and fighting for the progressive issues that we're fighting for. We've never seen that this far out on Long Island before. So it's very new. This is very much like the first time a progressive candidate is running unapologetically on Medicare for All and Green New Deal. And the amount of young people that said, I'm so happy to vote for you. This is my very first vote. And I'm so happy I get to vote for a candidate that matches my ideology. And that was really special. So, we're in this mode of like gratitude and at the same time still going full throttle to make sure everyone has what they need to make sure that they can get to the polls and vote. And hi, Amanda, nice to see you.
Hey, oh my gosh, it's the day.
It's a progressive family. This is, I think, one thing that people may not know is how much of a family. I've never seen anything like this. I mean, Dominique ran Alessandra Biaggi's campaign, who is now a state senator, and that was, I think, the first time I had ever seen a family. And this is a little bit different. I will even say that. All these challengers to the IDC, which were, just a reminder to folks, they were the 8 Democrats who were caucusing with Republicans in New York State, flipped that back, and Dominique was very involved in one of those races. But to see this, it's not a slate, it's not a unified slate. Some people have endorsements from the same folks, some don't. But I love this camaraderie that all of you have with each other, and respect, and I think that's new in politics, because there's a lot of like territorialism and transactional stuff, and so it's really nice to see this, frankly, solidarity. I mean, that's what we all preach, but it's really lovely to see that you all get along and
I think people don't realize that you're going a year income free, or you're moving back with your parents, or you're defaulting on your student loans. It's a very isolating experience. You're spending 6 hours a day calling people and asking them for money. I've had a front row seat to that. I've not had to do it, and I wouldn't do it, but I'm in total awe of anyone who would put themselves and their families through that. Melanie has 3 young children under the age of 10. I'm just in total awe of you. And there absolutely are, little girls everywhere or progressives everywhere looking at the race that you guys have run and that you're running and going, I could do that too. But the sacrifice is immense. You've given up an entire year of your life. So I'm in total awe of what you're doing. I would love to know, while we have all 3 of you on, and I know all of you personally, how do you guys feel about all the other races happening? Do you have any predictions? Is there any race that you're super excited about? Amanda, I know you are working with a bunch of different races that are on the ballot today. I know there's like 500 different positions up for election in New York City alone today. So this is a really big election day. And of course, we have the presidential that was off and then back on, and whether that was a factor, whether confusion was a factor. There are 100,000 absentee ballots out in Westchester and over 700,000 in New York City. So we are not likely to actually know those results. Sorry, Melanie.
We'll get to that in a second, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so if any of you want to speak to, or all 3 of you, what you're most excited about in terms of the races that we're looking at tonight. Melanie's in New York 3, Andam lives in New York 16. Which are the most exciting nail biters?
Well, for me, and this is going to be kind of a lame answer, but I'm really excited about every single one of them. Everyone talks about who's viable, who's not, who's electable, who's not. But I've gotten to know so many of the progressive candidates running, and they're all so fantastic. And I think it's, in many cases, it's going to depend on voter turnout and who can drag the most voters to the polls, and you talked a minute ago about that unity and that solidarity. And I think the reason for that is because none of us are running for that power. We're not running for that transactional politics. We're in it for transformation. We're all running because we want to see everyone have healthcare. We want to see housing justice. We want to see an improved education system. We want to save our planet. And so I think, ideologically, we're all so aligned that there's just such a tremendous amount of respect for all the candidates that have run this year. And I think also we've been so fortunate this year that in many races we've had more than one progressive and strong progressive, like Ando. I was like blown away at Amando, and I was just so excited to be part of that movement and just see so many amazing candidates stepping up. So that's a lame answer, but I'm really excited about all of them.
Yeah, just like really quickly, I've learned so much from so many of the other candidates. Melanie and I, we had a conversation when we both announced last June. Maybe we were talking in June, July, and we've never even met, but I can remember back a year ago now at this point, we had that conversation about when we were just first announcing. And then of course, Amanda and I had drinks and just we all in some ways have a connection with each other, even if it's not explicitly having met each other or sat down with each other, but we follow each other on Twitter. We learn from each other. We're like, oh, that's a really great idea that Mel Galgarin did, or what Adem or what Mondaire was doing was really cool, and we need to do that in our campaign, in our race. So yeah, we definitely try to pick up things that we're learning from each other. Certainly not MS Paint from Representative Engel, but all the challengers are doing great things.
Yeah, I think that solidarity in New York is so cool. It's interesting because for me, like from a work perspective, we have tons of stuff in New York. And then also I was anxiously checking Twitter earlier as Charles Booker was filing his injunction to keep the polls open in Kentucky, since there were hours-long lines at the fairgrounds. So they're all really exciting. I mean, one thing I will say is, the progressive movement here in New York, there is a lot of solidarity. It's interesting because one of the first people I actually met up with, who was also a candidate, was actually Lindsay, who was also in my race. We had breakfast together. She made the schlep out to Borough Park, which was really nice because my F train never ran. And so, I think that there's a lot that can be done with all of the progressive movements in New York. I think Maloney and I only met after I left my race, but I was at a Queens event because despite never living in Queens, I'm always there somehow. But I think that there's a lot of exciting stuff, particularly in New York. I mean, we have all these amazing congressional challengers, but there's so much happening down ballot right now. That's kind of crazy. And one shout out I do want to give, I was actually walking my dog yesterday and carrying her. She has an injured leg, but we walked past the Paperboy Prince Love Bus. And I just want to highlight,
this is amazing.
Yeah, so I recently moved from Borough Park right before the pandemic. I actually moved, ironically, to get closer to the Reach office, and now I work from home. So I'm very close to my office now. But I saw the Paperboy Prince Love Bus, people tanning, music playing, plastered with all of these signs. And so I think we would be remiss if we talked about the congressional primary without giving Paperboy Prince a shout out too.
When did you? This is fascinating. I want to give Melanie a couple of minutes because she's going to have to jump since she's running. It's campaign day for her, election day for her. But I do want to go back to Paperboy Prince because I'm very curious about the evolution of his campaign. But Melanie, I mean, in these moments when you've had a campaign during COVID, how have you creatively had to use your creative juices to break through? He's a machine in himself. Like Tom Suozzi. He's not playing nice, if I think that's probably fair to say. And he has a lot of money. So how have you been able to break through and get people's attention, in such an unusual time?
Yeah, I mean, look, certainly we were never going to be able to compete with his money. And he's certainly destroying a small rainforest with the mailers that he's sending to folks in the district every day. But the reality is that my campaign was so much better equipped to transition to a digital campaign. And we did that really well. And we got the jump on not only his campaign, but we were one of the first races that were out right away. We started doing events and we had doctors in talking about COVID like way early in the game. We started doing a lot of content, a lot of, Medicare for All town halls, and on a variety of other topics as well. And we started bringing people in that way. We started very early on transitioning our meet and greets to Zooms. I know everybody at this point is like all zoomed out, but at the time, it was still pretty fresh. So we did things like that. And certainly we have a huge intern program. I think at this point, we probably have close to 40 interns. And we still had people reaching out to our campaign this week asking to intern. So we have probably an additional 75 student volunteers. And so we do creative programming. So we would do like a college day. We had a pride parade, while we were doing phone calls. We did a prom. We did a lot of different things to keep people engaged. And we just really kept at it. We were really relentless in working our networks. And thank God we had done a lot of good groundwork. We had knocked tens of thousands of doors before COVID. And we had really built deep relationships with a lot of the organizations in my district. And so they put on a lot of, events for us as well. But it was every day, we would get up at, 7, 8 in the morning and we would go until 10:30 at night. And, we just kept at it. And now I think, we're hopeful that all our hard work has paid off.
Melanie, talk a little bit about what's happening in this district with Suozzi. So you're the best voice for that. And your background and why you're the perfect alternative to him.
Yeah, absolutely. So many people don't know about Tom Swazi. Oftentimes they're like, Tom who? They're not even sure. They don't even know that he exists as a representative. And there's a reason for that. It's because he works very hard to never take a chance. He never takes a risk. He is the politically expedient representative, if you will. He will never come out, and he has no political courage, essentially. And on top of that, he's the vice chair of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is a caucus that is comprised of Republicans and conservative Democrats. They say they caucus together for bipartisanship, but what we always see is that anytime they caucus together, it always favors the GOP. He also caucuses with the Environmental Caucus, which sounds lovely, except that's another caucus that's comprised of Democrats and Republicans. But get this, those Republicans don't believe that humans have caused climate change. So we see him with organizing these alliances, and they're always corporate backed, or they're always GOP backed. He's broken with the party on ICE. He's one of the few Democrats that broke to support ICE. He's a terrible, terrible record on immigration. Before I jumped in the race, he was supporting the Hyde Amendment, wouldn't budge on it. He rolled back Obama era banking regulations. He was one of the last Democrats to sign on to impeachment. He didn't sign on to the emoluments lawsuit. He didn't sign on to the Stephen Miller resignation letter, and it goes on and on and on and on. He's not representing the district. The demographics here have shifted post-Trump. And I know this because we've been knocking doors for years and years and years. And this district has lit up. It's become alive. People want change. People want a leader. They want a representative who's going to fight for democratic values. And that's what we've given them. We've given them an alternative. Jay Jacobs, who is the Democratic state chairman, he's also the Nassau County chairman. I believe he and Tom are business partners, and they have a long history of a relationship together. So they're super tight. And that's been a difficult relationship here to navigate as I'm running my race. But they have really built this democratic-ish machine that isn't very democratic. And, I think there are so many folks, Democrats in our district, who want to see Democrats fighting for Medicare for all. They want to see Democrats fighting for equality. They want to see LGBTQ rights. They want to see Black Lives Matter. They want to see Democrats fighting for people. And we haven't had that. And I think that's why my race has been so refreshing. And I think, over the last few weeks, we've really caught on like wildfire in the district. And, we've had just such tremendous support. And, we may just be a surprise upset, and we're very, very excited about it.
Really exciting. It's been wonderful. I mean, Dominique knows this. We've worked with you and your campaign and your husband, Doug, who's probably off in the corner. So if he wants to give a shout out, I'm sure they'll hear him. We've worked with you guys so closely, and it's been really inspiring to see how the campaigns have evolved and grown throughout the cycle, in ways that we could have never imagined these challenges. Anybody have any other questions before Melanie has to go? I mean, I would love to say we're going to get the results tonight, but we will touch on that in a second, because I know we're getting a lot of questions from folks about when are we getting the results. But do you have any sense of that locally?
We do not. We certainly know that the in-person votes will go live at some point tonight, but we know that the turnout has been, much, much lower. What I do know is they will not start counting absentee ballots until July 1st. And then, of course, July 4th is going to happen. So it could be that we won't know anything for, I don't know, a couple of weeks, maybe even 3-4 weeks. So we're hoping it's sooner, but nobody has really been able to give us a timeline.
And
we're going to keep campaigning because I can't lose those weeks. After we win, we got to keep going. So we'll keep campaigning.
You've got another 40 minutes. If people are inspired to help you out, is there anything they can still do? Can they hop on the phones? Can they still donate? Is there any do you still need money? What can people do?
We always need money because we're going to have such a tremendous amount of ballots to be counted. We just don't know how that process is going to go. So we'll likely need funding for lawyers. Absolutely, funding is always very, very helpful. But you can also jump on the dialer if you follow us on Instagram or on Facebook, Dorigo for Congress. You can get some instructions on how to jump on the dialer, reach out to us, and we'll set you up.
Awesome. Melanie, thank you. Go make those calls. You have 40 more minutes to get people
Yep,
to turn
go.
out.
Thank you so much.
Good
Nomi,
luck.
great. Amanda
Congrats.
and Anna, great to see you guys. Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Great race, Melanie.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thanks,
You should
guys.
be
Congratulations,
you.
Melanie.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. And now we have she's
Hey,
setting up
Liz.
right now. See, this is like a family. Everyone knows
Look at
everyone.
that
Just gonna say
timing.
hi to Lindsay real quick. Lindsay, love you.
Hey.
Best of luck today. I'm hopping off. I'll see you soon.
Okay. Hey guys, this is
This
a
is
great
Lindsay.
crew.
Lindsay Boylan, who we've been talking about you. Lindsay is running for Congress against Jerry Nadler. Such a, you've been on the show once. We've talked about you. I think a lot of folks are reoccurring customers of the show. Lindsay, how you holding up right now? What's happening on the ground?
I'm excited to have a feeling when I know what to what I know what to observe. It's kind of a wait and see, and we were prepared to not really know tonight, right? Because of the number of absentee ballots. But I'm excited. I'm tired. 14 months of tired, but yeah, I'm excited. We'll see.
So, for those who aren't aware of Jerry Nadler has definitely made a name for himself in the last year with impeachment, but prior to that, he had been in office for 3 decades. So, could you give us some updates on his crowning accomplishments in Congress?
Yeah, I think that was a big question for people because he'd never really been challenged in the history of his career. He had one real primary in 2016, but it wasn't, in my view, a really serious one. And this is the first cycle where he had a lot of really credible people challenging him. And so it was really the first chance to look at his record. And he's simply passed a handful of pieces of legislation into law over 3 decades. And 2 of those are ceremonial. One is naming a building after the guy who died in office so he could get the seat through county committee, which is a familiar narrative for incumbents who've been there forever. It's the kind of career where he's responsible or partially responsible for all of the other electeds that represent me and represent a lot of people in this community. It's very much a machine, as you could call it, in Manhattan. And this whole time, as much as he touts his this kind of narrative of being a liberal lion, he takes a ton of money directly from corporations, and it's about as much money from companies as it is from people. And it's in many cases companies that he should have a hand in regulating moving forward. Particularly, his biggest donors from the corporate side are Facebook and Google, and he's supposed to lead us forward on questions of antitrust. And I think, to sum up your question, it's not that he's necessarily got the wrong views, so to speak, for a district that is progressive. It's that he's just always been a follower, not a leader. And if you're looking for someone to move the ball forward on issues of climate change or extreme inequality, which I think are the 2 biggest interconnected issues of our time, he's not going to get it done. He's going to appear like he's doing work, and he's going to behind the scenes do whatever he's told. And I think we need to be done with that generation of leaders in this country.
I want to open it up to everybody else, but I just have one quick question. Can you describe what the machine a little bit more in depth means? This is a big theme of our show, is to kind of dismantle and take apart how all these structures that you hear about all the time, like what is the DNC, what is the machine, and it does exist in New York. So you've had he runs a machine. So can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty proud of it. There was a City and State article from some years ago called The Godfather, and it basically, the opening premise of the piece is that he is uniquely responsible for Eric Schneiderman and his career.
Eric Schneiderman, the former AG, who
resigned in infamy because of his treatment of women. And the article proceeds to talk about a number of predominantly older white men that Jerry Nadler has been responsible for getting into office or keeping in office. And even the way that they talk about, I think, the 1 or 2 women in that circle is in a very disparaging way. Linda Rosenthal got to come along, and it's just, that alone is so much of what I think needs to end in this country. The idea that because you're part of someone gets you your job in many ways, or helps you get your job, that you are then beholden to them for the rest of your career. And I think it's pretty clear that all of these folks have just fallen into line in terms of endorsing him. But it goes beyond that. It goes to organizations like the Working Families Party, who never bothered to even interview me. In fact, they stonewalled me when I asked for interviews for their endorsement process, because they have a longstanding relationship with the congressman. It speaks to our famous, what is it, Great Lady, the New York Times, that is supposed to have their weight have their endorsement carry some weight, and they didn't even bother to meet with me, and they have yet to respond to my inquiries of how they can possibly call that an endorsement process. It speaks to all of the things that we tried to move away from, and that we look back on in a very negative light with Tammany Hall. All the political clubs that are supposed to be independent literally just become stamp of approval organizations for him. And all of that ends up meaning that a very specific demographic gets to decide whose voice advances and whose legislation gets heard. And big surprise, it's predominantly older white people. And if there was ever a moment that really was not going to cut it, I would say it's right now.
Real quick, just before we move to our next question, Andam, I hear you have to go. We want to thank you for running. Thank you for showing up. Any parting words? Where can people find you? What's next?
Yes, thanks so much. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Andam for NY. And yeah, we're just, look, tonight in NY16, it's going to be crazy. So hopefully everyone just pulls for Jamal and we can unseat a corporate militaristic Democrat who's been in office for 31 years. And Lindsay, best of luck to you. Sending you good vibes.
Thank you.
And appreciate all of you. See you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Talk soon.
Anybody have questions for Lindsay? I have a million, so I'm just going to leave it to you guys first.
Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, Amanda and I met at a diner like a year ago, I think.
Yeah, I was saying earlier that we were talking about how all the candidates in New York know each other and how there's this solidarity. And I was like, actually, I think one of the first candidates I met was Lindsay, who, unlike Jerry Nadler, came to Brooklyn, which was always my biggest axe to grind in that race, was a lack of visibility and a lack of representation for the large portion of the district that lived in Brooklyn. So yeah.
I went by the diner most recently. Was it Friday? Every day blends together now.
Were they open?
And then they were, but I think they were, but where I actually went to get lunch was the bakery that we were supposed to go to. And that was amazing. Like down the street, that Mexican bakery, and they put a poster up in their window. And I was just thinking, I wanted to tell you about that. I had these amazing tacos for lunch and of course pastries, but it was just very funny.
That's so weird that they weren't open the time we were trying.
But they're open now.
Yeah. That's it's interesting. I was saying that I moved to North Brooklyn to get closer to work, and I will say, for whatever North Brooklyn has built in their bakery scene, Borough Park's got it beat.
The baked goods are good.
Hyper local baked goods, competitions here. So Lindsay, you had this debate. I watched it a couple of days ago with Jerry Nadler and Jonathan Herzog. I was blown away by your energy and your remarks. My favorite line, if I can just throw this out there, and you can go back and watch this if you want to see a masterclass in debate, was when Errol Lewis, who famously threatened to shut off my microphone in my debate, real champion of women, Errol Lewis had asked you, you've criticized Jerry Nadler for not being progressive. He says he's a progressive, something like that he asked. And what was your response, Lindsay?
No, he is not a progressive in any way, shape, or form.
And you have a shirt. You're leaving out the punchline.
Oh my God, the boss lady. Yes. No, I have a t-shirt that says boss lady, but it doesn't make me Queen Elizabeth, you know? It just like completely, it was fun. I had fun with it. You know, you're so used to living in a misogynistic world, which we do, but you're still always surprised by it. I think I was still surprised by it because I've always had to be aggressive, and like, especially in a debate, I was like, I'm going up against two lawyers. I got to have my shit together. I've got to be there. And people really hated there were some supporters of my opponent that like hated my face, and that my face was offensive. Like, someone was like, oh, I felt so nauseous when I saw her face. I mean, it's kind of funny because it's like those mean tweets about people. But it was a good learning experience. Not like I'm going to change in any way, because that's kind of what you see is what you get. But I was very happy with the outcome. I was not happy with how supporters of my opponent interpreted like me needing to be nice, which if I got to focus on being nice, I'm not going to be able to focus on doing what I need to do. And how long have we been asking people to hold Trump accountable, to not try and be conciliatory as Democrats? Like, you can't have it both ways. Like, you either want someone who's going to be aggressive when necessary and is going to like say things that are unpopular sometimes, or you want another crowd pleaser, and that's not why I'm running to do it. So it was a fun evening. Yeah.
Well, and it's also, and I just want to give Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. Amanda has to jump off because she's, monitoring these elections, including Booker's race right now. So we're so grateful for you joining us tonight, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I do just want to say, I watched not the debate live, but a rerun of the debate. And I think I messaged Lindsay, like, I think I'm drinking a beer. I was like, I'm eating popcorn watching this right now. It was pristine. But
good.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Good luck, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Always.
Thanks,
and,
Amanda.
Good luck to see you.
Hopefully we have some good news soon.
And
good to see you.
We have Kelly here. Kelly is from our team. She's been announced. She's going to chime in when she has thoughts. But can I just say, I love that this is all women. Kelly and I know this. Kelly she's been in the media world forever.
A woman with an infant is amazing.
I love it.
I love to see it. I have a question for Lindsay. So I work for Dominic's show, and I go through all of the video. And so, I went through your interview. I watched it your interview with Dominique. I watched it probably 10 times just to get the clips. But one of the things is that when I went to look for pictures for thumbnails for the videos, I saw a lot of pictures of celebrities with Jerry Nadler. And I was like, how exactly do these individuals who claim to be very progressive publicly, and I don't need to look into them. Like, I've just heard them claim that,
yes.
And I don't need to look much further than any of this. Like, how do they reconcile that? And did you attack anyone over it? Because it's weird to even see, because he's like, I don't know why people said they hate your face because it's gorgeous, but he's like gross. And so they're like in this picture with him, and I'm like, what is? It was weird.
The one thing I have to say, I don't know if I'll ever get used to, assuming I make this a lifelong career, this world, is that I've noticed, if you become more visible, you get people who kind of really love what you're doing, and then you get people who really hate what you're doing, and that's just, it comes together. And I have a few comedian friends who are like, it's the same thing, lady, both. And just like some of that negativity is not earned, I think sometimes the positive stuff is not earned. And I've been kind of blown away sometimes where I'll call someone, or I'll try and reach out, especially like a good feminist, it matters to me, women's leadership. It really matters to me, probably more than most things. Just given how I was raised and some of the difficulties women in my family had, it really means something to me. And it really does.
You had this thing with Warren. I mean, this seems like the perfect moment to discuss the elephant in the room, which I hate using that line, but Elizabeth Warren came out and endorsed Nadler. And that, I feel like that was the moment you were just like, no more. And if I could just add to that, I think they're scared of you because you're independent. You don't need to go to them. You're not going to roll over because they threaten you, because you've built your career on your own, and you didn't need them to raise them the money to give you, to say whether or not you should run. And I think the Warren response was a perfect moment where I saw you courageously stepping up and saying, no, that's not fair.
Yeah. And that's another example of like, I knew that people wouldn't like it because we like sort of canonize leaders, like we just said, like love and hate getting bigger and bigger, and people love Elizabeth Warren. They like, Warren Democrats were calling for Jerry Nadler all weekend. I get it. But I just thought it was total bullshit. Her quote was, Jerry knows how to win. Like, what does he know how to win? He knows how to win nothing. Like literally, there's so much you could say being like, he's been able to stay in office for 30 years and never get kicked out. I mean, that would be a better thing to say. He literally doesn't know anything about winning. He didn't even win the first time he came into office. He literally had someone die, and then he figured out how to collect votes at county committee. And, one of the benefits of having worked in government is knowing how shady politics can be. And when I left working for someone who was a bully and could be shady, I decided I didn't ever want to be a part of that. And if I'm willing to call out Andrew Cuomo on any day, then I should be, then what the hell do I care? You know what I mean? It was bullshit, and I called it out. And I guess people were surprised that I would confront her. I didn't think she was going to respond. Of course, she didn't respond. But the sensibility was that, how dare I say something about like this woman? And actually the attacks that came at me were mostly gendered. Like it was pretty clear that they were, people berating me as a mother and like all sorts of bullshit that is obviously not true. Like finding my wedding announcement online saying, you don't know, you said you had a hard childhood, but I saw you went to a private high school, which I didn't. But none of it even matters anyways. Like all this, like, ridiculousness came afterwards. But the other weird thing I would say is that there were people who said, oh, what a misstep. And I'm like, I don't think it was a misstep. I was being myself. I think people should be more authentic in politics. If you don't want them to be doing, if you don't want them to be acting in politicized ways, then you're going to have to accept them for the reality of who they are. And that was me being me, having had a lot of faith in her and having supported her early on. I got more donations in one day than I had my whole campaign. And it was weird because people became aware of me because of that, and to love me or, love what we're about. And then there were people who like were hate aware of me. Like, and it was just part of that weird reality, which if I ever become something else, it would be a comedian to talk about this bizarre reality of, getting in this space. But it was, she was the first person I donated to in this, was it her? Yeah, I think it was. I really believe in women's leadership. And ultimately I supported Bernie, and I really believe that he was the right person to carry the progressive movement. And I voted for him. But I did believe in her. And if like I had people online saying, oh my God, I can't believe she gave to blah, blah, blah. And it was a bunch of women candidates. I'm like, what's your point? You know what I mean? Like everything becomes a chip for people to critique you on. And it's kind of funny.
People have been extremely hard on you, I think, in ways that, and maybe I'm just a little bit more sensitive because I've run in New York City as well, and the press can be very hard, and they pry through your history and they won't necessarily tell the truth. I mean, that we could write a book together about this. But I do think like there's something to be said about this demonization of women that stand up and speak out when they're told to behave a certain way, and they use the mob. It's very organized. I mean, that's one thing, like, and I ask you guys in the audience to pay, and I know you're smart and you recognize this, but a lot of this stuff, this misinformation being placed out there is is mob spreading. Like, there are people organizing that messaging and paying folks to throw it out there into chats, to organizer chats. And you know, at the end of the day, Jerry Nadler has a record, and you're running against that record, and you have a platform, and his platform's not the same as yours. And so you, if you were elected, should be held to that platform.
Yes.
I feel like it's like the Salem witch trials. It's like burn her. There's this mob mentality.
It does feel that way. It does. I've been a little surprised by it because it kind of shocked me how blatant it was, you know, about my appearance, about me being childish, like all this like sort of infantilizing, all of this sort of let me fix you kind of stuff. I don't need anyone to fix me at all. I'll just say that right now. I don't need to be fixed. Do I think I'm perfect? No, but I'm happy with my imperfections. And it's not that I'm not absorbing the world and changing, but that's what we call listening. But I don't need to be fixed. And there's always an effort to fix women. And I think it's total bullshit. And I'm generally an introvert, which always surprises people. I love people, but I don't necessarily like want to see I don't live for seeing my face and name everywhere. It doesn't really do it for me. But that's how you win in office. So it is what it is. So I never thought I would like write a book. I'm absolutely writing a book this summer. Like I want it to be funny, and I want it to be like calling people out. I want to do all of those things. I cannot wait. Each chapter is going to have like a mean name, or not a mean name, but like, you know, I hope it's something people read, because this is ridiculous. You know, I'm excited.
Lindsay, we love you. If you want to stay on. I just want to welcome Mel. Mel's been sitting here patiently. Hey, Mel Gagarin is running. Everybody knows each other. Running for Congress in the 6th district, correct? Against Representative Grace Meng, who is also, for folks who might know that name for other reasons, she is a vice chair of the DNC. It's how I got to know her, or sort of know her. I mean, does anybody really know Grace Meng? But I endorsed Mel today, you know, way to call it in last minute. Mel, great to see your face.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
How are you feeling over there? You're in Queens. Can you describe the district a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. So the 6 is pretty much, you know, it's all Queens, it's central Queens, northeast Queens, all the way from Ridgewood off in the west to Bayside in the east. We got Flushing up north. Forest Hills, Rego Park, Kew Gardens, Richmond Hill, Jamaica. I mean, we have the whole lot of it. It's a pretty diverse chunk of Queens we got.
So this is, I think, actually the most diverse district in the country, for people who may not be aware. And your organizing background, like you worked on Tiffany Gabon's race. What tell us a little bit about why you decided to run against Grace Meng?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, I came up in quote unquote traditional Democratic politics and kind of lost my faith in electoral politics about a decade ago, and you know, decided to go work on issues that I cared about, social justice issues, race issues, women's issues at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Planned Parenthood. I was at an organization working to connect formerly incarcerated women to higher education, and we also worked to introduce the Real Act in Congress that would restore Pell Grants to incarcerated students, you know, undoing one of the original sins of the '94 crime bill. And, you know, I took some time off. I was raising my 3 children and finishing my master's, and, you know, Donald Trump gets elected, and that's a fucking disaster. And I thought, all right, well, 2018 is coming. There's this blue wave. There's going to be all these really progressive champions that are going to be able to push back on this administration. And, you know, we ended up with a handful of them, and the vast majority of Democrats continue to play the same old game. You know, like they pay lip service to, you know, all the right things, but, you know, on the votes and everything. I mean, like, look, Grace Meng voted to undercut Dodd-Frank 2 years into the Trump administration. I mean, who did you think that this administration was going to serve, right? 2017, she bloated for the Thin Blue Line Act, right? Undercutting the Black Lives Matter movement. And then, you know, she's turning around and trying to pretend that she's a criminal justice reformer. You know, and when I was, you know, knocking on doors for Tiffany and going around what was supposed to be a conservative district, you know, you had folks that you would never imagine that were really open to reform. They were open to progressive ideas. And I you know, I realized that we're living one of the most dangerous moments in American history, and our leaders have failed us. If there was ever a time to run, it had to be now, because, you know, I think that, you know, she's flown under the radar. You know, on paper, you know, her votes are terrible, right? You know, she caters to her donors. You know, Raytheon, Wall Street, you name it. But keeps a low enough profile that it's you go, oh, she's just a go along, get along Democrat, and it's like, well, no, that's worse. And even if she were, we can't afford that under this administration. If we don't have folks that are actively pushing back on what is a fascist regime, we're it's going to be too late to do anything about it. And so I really felt like I had no choice and threw my hat in the ring.
It's been really inspiring because I mean I know her. I've seen her work at the DNC. I covered her race when I was back at TYT. I had no idea how conservative she was. And just a reminder to folks, this is the most diverse district in the country. And, Queens is the most diverse place on the planet, if you think about that for a second, because of all the immigration. How on earth can you be taking money from Raytheon and working with them and aligning with these interests and get away with it in New York, given the roots? It's really mind-boggling. And it was just, as soon as I saw that and I saw what you were representing and knowing your work, I mean, it was a complete no-brainer.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the challenge that, again, she's very good at saying the right things, comes and does the photo ops and people feel like, okay, that's enough. But it's not, I mean, like I said, we're living in really dangerous times. She voted against the Obama-Iran deal. And, it's not like that was something in the past, even in the midst of this campaign, she partnered with Joe Wilson that, if exactly right, to deploy the Iron Dome, and who makes the missiles for that system? Raytheon, of course. And so, that stuff that it matters, all of that matters, like I said, when we were talking earlier, I had a discussion with someone this week who was like, oh, well, the Thin Blue Line Act, that was 3 years ago. I'm like, look, for you and I that are not Black Americans, that don't feel the oppressive boot of police violence on our neck, it may seem like it was just 3 years ago, but you have to put it in context, right? Black Lives Matter begins the year that she begins her tenure in Congress. 2014 is Eric Garner. And, the list has only grown exponentially since then. This is not something that just happened back then. It sent a clear message to Democrats that it's okay to be law and order, like pay lip service to the cops in your district. Don't do the tough job of talking about accountability. Don't do the tough work about talking about reforms that people may not be open to. But that's our jobs as legislators, right, as policymakers, is to look at the whole spectrum and understand where the policy solutions are and make those arguments. This idea that we have to morph our beliefs to fit the electorate makes no sense, right? You have a lot of working class folk that live in this district. They're busy living their lives. They're not policy experts. It's our job to be able to communicate, from those that have been closest to the problem, that can help inform the solutions to help us move forward.
Do any of you guys have questions for Mel? Dominique is super involved in Democratic politics in New York. She's also got her baby, so I don't want to be intrusive.
No, I actually I would love to just we're just meeting for the first time. I feel like I know most of the other candidates in person, but I've been producing a baby during this pandemic. Maybe that's why. But I'd just love to hear a little bit about your background and what prompted you to run, just on a personal level, and what it's been like, and also how you're feeling. You're just 10 minutes out from the polls closing tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we literally just rushed off the field to come in and do this. We've been out there to the last minute. Feeling good. It's been good interactions. Who knows what's going to happen with the absentee ballots and the BOE's handling of this election. Obviously, I think we're going to be we might be in this for the long haul. So if anybody's watching and wants to still throw a couple of dollars to the campaign, melforprogress.com, because I think we're gonna have to be in the courts this summer. But yeah, for me, I grew up in this district. I was born in Elmhurst, in a 1-bedroom apartment, raised by my mom and my abuela. My mom was a nurse up until she retired 3 years ago. I did sort of all of the right things that you're supposed to do to succeed in life, and still found myself struggling through all of that. Like I said earlier, I worked for a state senator. I worked for a congressman for a bit. I actually ran for city council in 2009. And that's sort of when I lost sort of faith in the traditional Democratic Party. And when you really get to see the inside workings of the Democratic Party here in New York, it's anything but sort of a fair and inclusive sort of machine, and that's what it is. And they have for so long choked out the ability for up and coming folks with new ideas that are from the communities that they serve. that really understand the problems that those at the front lines are facing to really enter sort of that space. And so then I went to work at the NAACP Legal Defense Fund for a few years, shaping communications around, their Supreme Court cases, Planned Parenthood in New York City, and at CCF working to, again, eliminate barriers to higher education for currently and formerly incarcerated folk. So, in all of those spheres, I either found myself on the Hill or in Albany doing public policy advocacy. And, again, being a stay-at-home dad for the past couple of years, trying to finish my master's and seeing everything that was going on in the country and sort of how ineffective Representative Meng was at being an actual force to push back on the stuff that was going on, spurred me to throw my hat in the ring. I know that one of the big things that in her messaging has always been about being a mom, and I think that that's wonderful. But at the same time, when you have children that are at, detention centers, 24 of which had already, died there when she voted to fund ICE. To me, that was the moment where I'm like, I'm done with this. Like, we're going to pay like this political bullshit and not do the things that matter. We can't give Trump $1 billion to build a wall because we need to open the government. If there was ever a time to shut down the government, it was then. We shouldn't have caved. We needed Democrats in office who were willing to hold the line and do what was right, because those kids are still, we still have kids at the border right now in the middle of this primary. And there's a very good chance that, Trump wins re-election. There's a good chance that maybe Representative Meng wins tonight. But if she does, she needs to be held accountable. She has to know that we're watching and that we're not going to back down, because those kids' lives just as much as ours do.
Mel, it's just shocking to me that like a Democrat in New York in the era of Trump would continue to think that they got away with that. And she's younger in terms of generationally, just so folks know. She's been in office since I believe 2012, if I recall.
Yeah, she was in the assembly before that. She replaced her dad, yeah.
And so let's talk a little bit about the machine. This has been a constant theme all night. We have challengers challenging the machine in New York, and the machine can have different forms in New York. You have more progressive machines, you have conservative machines. There's even Republicans, believe it or not, in Staten Island and even in Queens. Yeah. But, this is a different type of machine. Can you break down what her family has represented in Queens, really, throughout her life, at least?
Yeah, look, I think that they have been very much a friend of the real estate industry. I think that you see it in her donors, right? She's taken tons of money from the real estate industry whenever the community's ever needed, representation in opposing any of these developments that have been literally pushing out the immigrant and working class folk from these neighborhoods. And there really is a class divide. When we first came into this race, people are like, oh, like, how are you going to run? Like, it's isn't it a big Asian population, and aren't they all? And I'm like, folks, you got to stop thinking about representation just as like a race thing, or like there's a division throughout this district that crosses class and race lines, and that matters, right? Because if you talk to working class folk, no matter what nationality they may be, the complaints are the same, and they feel equally as neglected, and they feel equally as ignored by the machine politics that has dominated Queens for so long. And there's a reason for that, and you can't ignore the role that real estate plays. I think that's why it resonates with so many folks, no matter what race you're in. The minute you bring up this person takes a bunch of real estate money, there's immediate like, all right, they're not on our side, right? So yeah.
Yeah, New York is a real estate town. Mel, this is really interesting. Do you have any sense from the Board of Elections about how soon anything will come in? I'm asking everybody because I'm hearing different answers from all the candidates,
right?
Which is weird.
Yeah, what we've heard is that there's 7 days until they count absentee ballots, and then there'll be another period while they dedupe, absentee and whatever happened, at the polls. Like killer job Cuomo. We've been trying to sound the alarm for weeks, because like there's just been so much confusion. And my hat's off to the actual employees of the BOE who have been doing their best to kind of manage the situation. But I don't know. Like I'm still, like I said, I'm still sort of have the PTSD from the Caban recount, and that was one race. I can't imagine what it's going to be like with so many different races throughout the city happening tonight. And my hope is that democracy is able to come out okay at the other end of this. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Do you guys have any questions for Mel? And Mel, you're welcome to stick around. We're going to have Lauren Ashcraft on any second now, just to give you a little heads up. We're doing like a rapid fire, but stick around, ask questions, join in. This is a big family. We've never done anything like this before, so
Yeah,
I'm just happy the internet's working.
Yeah, I'm going to hang out for 5 more, and then I'm going to get pulled. Thank you so
Yep.
much for having me, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you guys have any questions?
Just really strikes me as like the similarities. I'm in New York 16 and my representative is Engel. And of course, all the weapons manufacturers, you know, are really cozy with him too.
Yeah.
And I feel like we were just talking about the Nadler race. There are a lot of parallels. Of course, there are also a couple of seats in New York, like Nita Lowey's seat in New York 17. And we will have Mondaire on a little later. And then also New York 15. That's like a free for all for an empty seat.
Right.
These seats, you know, people sit in them for 30 years. It feels like this once in a lifetime kind of opportunity. But just the parallels between these, you know, I know Grace is a little different. She's not one of the dinosaurs that's been in since the 80s, but just in terms of that weapons manufacturer money. And then I'm hearing here from, you know, people who call themselves progressives, oh, well, they're just taking the money, you know, because they need to defend themselves against Republicans, or, you know, that's the law, that's Citizens United. Like, what are they supposed to do about it? And yet there's this whole class of progressives that somehow is able to run and sometimes win, right? Like AOC or Biaggi, like with your hands tied. And it's not any easier to tie your own hands behind your back, but there's definitely, they're refusing. You know, I feel like that's a line in the sand. You don't get to call yourself a progressive while you're taking weapons manufacturer money, while you're taking corporate money, while you're taking real estate money, and yet they do.
Yeah.
So it's
you know, it's one of those deals with the devil that the Democratic Party has made, where they convince themselves that they're going to take the money and that they're not going to be beholden to the donor. And it's like, look, we all know how this works. Of course you're going to do it. Like, you know, these corporations aren't doing it out of charity. You know, they don't believe in you. Like, they have an agenda. Like, that's how this works. Like, you know,
they found it to be a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, like, voters need to stop being so forgiving about that. You know, I think we definitely, you know, I think as a movement, we need to continue to, you know, just even beyond the electoral space, to continue to organize it, you know, in our communities, and really, you know, get folks tapped in onto what's really going on, because they, you know, they're just kind of oblivious to some of this, and it's incredibly problematic, and there are real life consequences to constantly catering to these donors, because, you know, again, you know, we learned the lesson in 2008, and then just, you know, again, just not to just pick on Grace, but, you know, how are you going to weaken Dodd-Frank? You know, after you saw how we got into that financial crisis in the first place, and now here we are again post-COVID, staring at another potential economic disaster, and you know, Wall Street's the main beneficiary from this.
I hear your kids in the background, or someone's kids.
Yeah.
Mel, this is, I mean, it's jarring to see. I think, you know, in 2018, people after Trump, people woke up to realize that their legislature wasn't actually Democratic, and they started organizing against the 8 Democrats who were holding up the legislature. I mean, the entire state should be Democratic. And now I think people are waking up to realize that their House members in New York are not really real. I mean, in some cases, as bad as Swazi, they're actually caucusing with Republicans. But in the case of Grace Meng, she's the most conservative on the spectrum in New York, and she's supposedly young and a leader in the Democratic National Committee. Mel, where can people check you out? I know polls close in 2 minutes. You gotta, you know, do your thing.
Wow. Yeah. So if you go to www.melforprogress.com, you can check out our policy platform there. Again, if you can afford to make a small donation, we haven't taken any corporate PAC money, no real estate.
Or a big donation.
Or a big donation. Yeah. So long as you don't work for the big banks, we'll accept it, because yeah, you know, we plan on being in this battle till the very end, and that very well might mean being in the courts. So.
Awesome. Mel, thank you for doing this. Go kick some butt.
Thank you.
And hope to have you back on when you're about to be inaugurated.
Awesome. All right, here's Lauren.
Brief commercial message in between Lauren.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, Mel. Take care.
Bye-bye.
So we are about 1 minute away until polls close. I know a lot of you guys are checking in. I just want to update everybody. First off, if you have not liked or subscribed or are not sharing, Kelly here will kick my butt if I don't say to do that, because she is making sure that our channel grows. Kelly Carey, who's on the line.
I am here, and she's correct. I will come right down to Arizona, and I will punish Nomiki. No, but seriously, you know, Nomiki deserves attention, and I have posted 4 different videos of Lauren, and her message deserves attention, and every single person that has been interviewed by the show. I mean, I am tuned into this stuff, but these local races are just so important. And it starts to break my heart to think that anyone would possibly lose one. But, subscribing to Nomiki's YouTube channel and hitting the notifications bell, I mean, it really helps out, because just watching and, it can educate you, but just by watching, you're helping Nomiki fund her, different activities. So
my activities meaning you and all the team that keeps the show alive.
Not her activities like rollerblading,
my kombucha budget.
But yeah, her microphone and her backdrop and her camera and her Wi-Fi and
Yeah, we just had to upgrade the Wi-Fi. It's a whole other $100 a month, so definitely cuts into it. So
in a house that's not yours.
In a house that's not mine. I am going back to New York soon, so I'm excited.
I'm excited about Lauren.
I'm excited about Lauren too. Lauren, if as we lead into Lauren, I just have to say I recognize where you are, and if Roseanne is in your shot, call her over, because she is at a place right now called Catch Astoria, which Lauren, you don't know. I know you don't know this because no one knows this except for Roseanne. My dad, who is my cheerleader, and I guess it was Father's Day recently, so I have to give him a little bit of a shout out. And if he's watching, which he's not, because he doesn't know how to do this still to this day. He's like, I don't know how to watch a show. So he met Roseanne when the subway system was shut down in Astoria. Multiple stops were shut down. There was a community event, and Roseanne was there organizing it. And this is, I don't think Cynthia Nixon had announced yet, but my dad spilled the beans because I was involved in a race early and said, maybe we can get Cynthia Nixon to come here. She's going to run against Governor Cuomo and can talk about how the subway system is not being funded and Governor Cuomo is ruining it. And that was Roseanne from Catch. And so my office during my campaign, as Dominique knows, who's my campaign manager, keep it in the family, was right next to Catch. So we started throwing all these events there. Actually, we did it with Cynthia. We brought her there. And it has now become the progressive headquarters for Queens. And I'm going to say even New York City, because I've been to a bunch of events there that have nothing to do with Queens.
Isn't that like the epicenter of the whole movement?
It's so good. I love it. So Lauren, you're at Catch. You're at an election night watch party. Welcome to the show.
Yes, they're looking for Roseanne right now, but she'll definitely come say hi. Oh, she's here.
Oh my God. Wait, this is supposed to be about you, Lauren, but does she know what's going on?
Yeah.
Wait, this is not the Fox News. I usually see you on television. I'm in my kitchen cooking, in my humble kitchen.
I can't hear you. I don't know.
I'm in my humble kitchen cooking every so often, and I look up and there's Dominique, and I'm like, oh my God, she's on television again.
Roseanne, the godmother of the movement, thank you for once again hosting and for supporting Lauren.
Yes,
Yeah. I'm glad that you're opened up again. I'm really happy.
Well, it's been a crazy couple of months. I'm very happy.
Good. Well, I'll be there soon. I'll come and have a beer.
Yeah.
Or more.
Sure, I'll be here. But we're very happy to see you, and thank you for always being there.
Same to you. Solidarity, guys. This is how it works.
Yeah.
Support your local businesses. She's the best. So Lauren Ashcraft is running for Congress in my home district, clearly, because she's like a block from my apartment. Lauren, how do you feel tonight? Tell us a little bit about the state of the race, or polls just closed 4 minutes ago. Congratulations.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, it's been a whirlwind. I mean, we started with a team of 3. We ended the race with a team of 700.
Woo!
Yeah, and we've had thousands of donors. And today, when I was driving around the district with one of my team members, people would just say, Lauren Ashcraft, I voted for you. So I can't even, I mean, you know the feeling. I can't even put it into words. It's just to think about all the work that my team has put into this, and to think about the fact that people feel that our campaign has had an impact on the community. To me, that's we've won. it doesn't matter like what the results are, but if we've made a difference in someone's life or raised awareness about someone's struggles and it gets the attention it needs, like we've done our job. But I'm still watching to win tonight, so.
So you're running against Carolyn Maloney. How long has Carolyn been in office? Let's talk a little bit about her legacy and what it means to challenge her in this district in particular.
Yeah, she's been in office for 27 years. And, you know, let's talk about her history. It includes voting for the crime bill. It includes repealing the Glass-Steagall Act, which allowed for the corruption and fraud that led to the Great Recession in 2008. She voted for the Iraq War. She voted against the Iran nuclear deal. She voted to increase the military budget and also for the militarization of police. And then all of the bills that would have helped to prevent police brutality, she's ignored until June of 2020, when suddenly she co-sponsored 11 bills to help demilitarize police. And I'm gonna go ahead and take some of the credit for that because we wrote an email that made it on Fox News in which I called out her entire criminal justice reform record. So,
but what part of the email got Fox News's attention?
Am I allowed to say it?
Kelly, is she allowed to use the F word? Will we be demonetized or? Yeah. Okay. She says yes.
I stand by my stance. My email subject line was "fuck the police." And I got an email. We got an email from Fox News that night. I know, Nomiki, I texted you. They were like, "What do you mean, fuck the police?" I said, "You heard me. Fuck the police." And we explained exactly why. Like, here's how we ended up in a situation in which police are driving cars into crowds of protesters that are protesting police brutality. Fuck the police. That's what I mean. So that made Fox News.
That's, you know, sometimes it helps to create that controversy, even if it's Fox News, because they're so disconnected from like what's happening on the ground that their advertisement and saying that like you're ridiculous for saying the things that move you left actually are it mobilizes us. It's like creating an army, a solidified army. Okay, so your district, this is obviously Western Queens, which is extremely progressive, the most progressive district in the country. Story is split with AOC. You would receive this part of Astoria. Roosevelt Island, Upper East Side, the East Side, Lower East Side, East Village, into Brooklyn. Did I get everything?
Yeah. Did we say Roosevelt Island?
Yeah.
Yes. Then yes. It's basically a circle around the East River.
Naturally, where she's gonna try to dump
Lauren,
her body afterwards. I'm kidding.
I noticed that you're losing
I'm
your
kidding.
voice.
I'm kidding.
And Melanie was also losing her voice. What does today look like for you? Did you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning? Did you sleep at all last night? Like what was today like?
We slept 3 hours, me and most of the senior team. So yesterday until 2 a.m. we were putting signs up at poll sites 100 feet away from polling locations. And this morning we were at polls at 6 a.m. Stationed all around the district. And I did a tour around most of them. So we drove around and there's actually a video of us rolling down the windows, and probably why my voice isn't there anymore is because I was shouting at people to vote. So I still actually until like 8:55 p.m. I was shouting out this window.
Now you have a couple of other people in this race. You're running. She's running. Suraj Patel ran last time. So you know, he ran last time. He was the main challenger. Prior to that, Reshma Saujani, that's when I remember the first time she was challenged in a more serious way, because Reshma had raised a lot of money, but Reshma kind of ran to Carolyn's right. And I would say that Suraj pretended to run to her left, but was actually running to her right. So I just think that's crazy. You have this district, it's so progressive, and people are outrighting each other. Like, what have the dynamics been running against such a weird cast of characters?
It's been an interesting race, and we've learned a lot. But I think with Suraj, I mean, we would be tagged in the same questions on social media asking us what our stances are. And a lot of the times his answer would be like, what do you want to see from me? I have my stance, I have my platform, and that's a vision that I have for my community and for the country. That's why I'm running. And we've done this from volunteer power and people power, from passion for that vision. And it looks a lot different from somebody who has a few maxed out donors that have funded their race versus thousands of grassroots donors that base their platform on the needs of their community. So I'm hoping that the people power wins. And I know that we are not going anywhere. It's a movement that I'm really proud to be part of. And I certainly will continue to fight for my district no matter the outcome. And I know a lot of the people on our team have already committed the same. So Team Ashcraft is here to stay.
Awesome. Lauren, you are running in a year when a lot of progressives are running, and we've been talking about this a little bit, especially at the start of the show, how these coalitions and they make a difference. Like Jamal, everyone's watching the Jamal Bowman race right now, and Angle. And guys, if there's any breaking news, I just want to make sure to say this to you right now, because I know a lot of you are asking. We will definitely chime in. One of us will. We're all monitoring the results. But it's a little early. The polls just closed in New York, and there's a lot of electoral issues, even in Kentucky and other parts of the country. So we will make sure to chime in. But people are watching this Bowman Angle race, and there was a huge coalition that went behind Bowman at the end of the day. But, meanwhile, there's a lot of challengers out there who've been raising money, who've been running for a year and building their own little mini movements. And I think that's what's been really interesting to me is in the past, I've seen folks get behind maybe one big candidate, maybe neighborhood, support, like with the IDC, like all of us supported all of the candidates, and then they had people from their localities. But it's like everybody has their own flavor of the left movement. So, I mean, what's your flavor?
I mean, I belong to a lot of different groups, and I think we have our own flavor. We're kind of known for compassion and empathy, and that's what we've been pushing for too. I know one of the main criticisms I've gotten as a candidate is I come across too nice, and I'm like, have you seen me debate? Just because you're nice doesn't mean you can't fight for your community. So that is the flavor of our movement, is we're compassionate people that are out on the streets 6 a.m. fighting for our vision, for everyone to have a level playing field.
What tell us a little bit about your background. We've interviewed you, but maybe some folks on here haven't learned about you yet.
Yeah, so I'm running because of the struggles that I've seen my family face. I know, like, I come from an immigrant family. My grandmother was Japanese, and my dad was born in Japan. And I know that a lot of my family has faced xenophobia and racism as part of their immigration journey. And I think about the fact that we still put people in cages, we separate families, and we treat people seeking a life here as others. And we haven't improved since when my grandmother set foot in this country, and we haven't improved since we stole this land from the people who originally belonged here. So I'm very passionate about fighting the struggles that my family still faces. My grandfather was killed by corporate greed in a coal mining accident. I never got to meet him. I've had the privilege of meeting with Chris Smalls, who was fired from Amazon because of he stood up for the safety of his coworkers. That's the society that we live in right now. And I think about the fact that my other grandfather fell and lost his mobility. He was a quadriplegic. And I grew up as a caretaker for him because he couldn't afford one. And that's just how I grew up, as understanding that the government isn't there for you. And at some point along the way, I listened to Bernie Sanders' message and understood the terrible impact that corporate greed has on our politics. And I got really mad that our president is a sexual assaulter who brags about that. So I got really involved in helping to plan the Women's March on New York, organizing for intersectional gender justice. And I'm also a stand-up comedian who's used my art to help raise awareness around some of the most urgent issues our society faces and raises funds for nonprofits that fight for our rights throughout the community. So I've just been increasingly angry, and that has motivated me to become increasingly involved in the community. And eventually I just couldn't sit this out anymore. And that's why I got involved in this congressional race. And I'm very proud of my team and everything they've accomplished.
Lauren, when I was working on your videos and going through your Twitter, I thought that one thing that stood out was when you would go to different people's, I mean, obviously you were knocking on doors before a certain point, and when people would allow you to go through their apartments and you would tape it, I mean, it is something that I've seen before in certain places, but like it just should be repeatedly shown because it's so unimaginable to people that don't understand that people live like this and they cannot move, they have to pay, and it's an atrocity, you know. And I mean, with the problems piling up on top of each other, with unemployment and housing, I thought that you made a really good effort to point out exactly what the housing problems look like when they're at their worst. I mean, that actually isn't the worst that I've seen, but it's important. And it's like, it's very gracious of those people, honestly, to show their homes when it might be embarrassing. So anyone who wants to take a look can see on her Twitter. I mean, it's disturbing. It should not happen.
It's terrible. And thank you so much for watching. I just to point out why I'm running against Carolyn Maloney. Her team and supporters were very upset that I released that video, and I had to explain that I was invited and asked to do exactly that, is raise awareness around how people are forced to live. And you raised this point yourself, is people that are living in NYCHA don't necessarily have any other option. They're not able to sign a lease in a luxury condominium anywhere else. That's their home. And this particular woman has been living without a sink in her bathroom, with live wires hanging from her ceiling over her shower, holes in her walls, with lead paint peeling, with 2 small children, living in that place, in that condition for 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Yes.
That was, I mean, and you're right, like, I mean, it's complicated. People don't understand how it works. And I wouldn't expect like an average person to understand how it works. But like you said, with NYCHA, like, I mean, you're using vouchers and you can only live in certain places. And so you really do get trapped in the location that you are. And yeah, I mean, Carolyn Maloney, I mean, like Nomiki said, earlier in the show, New York is a real estate city. And I mean, if you can be bought and sold like that, then you are terrorizing normal people. That's what you're doing.
Exactly. And Long Island City, I think, Nomiki, last time we were talking on the show, we were talking about the gentrification, particularly of this district. And she has accepted a large amount of big real estate developer money, which is probably part of why my neighbors have been allowed to live in these conditions for so long. The worst part about it is not necessarily the condition, although that's terrible, but we actually marched down to the management office together, and they had no record of her 2 years of asking for help. So I'm going to continue to raise awareness about the atrocities that I've seen, and the politicians offended by this can deal with it, and they can do their jobs.
Yeah, it's interesting, Lauren. I mean, as you know, and I think we shared a lot of the same supporters, which is, I love it. When I ran for public advocate, it's an investigative position in New York. It's supposed to be the check on city council and the mayor's office and all of city government, frankly. But real estate is sort of the reason why that office existed. And so it was a central theme of our campaign. We were the only campaign that didn't accept any form of, which is kind of crazy, any form of real estate money. And it is it's so integrated in politics in New York that even the most progressive leaders still take some form of real estate developer money. And simultaneously, while that was all happening, the Amazon headquarters, I mean, all of the elected officials running in our race, there were like 17 of them, or 17 candidates, were pro-Amazon until it was not cool. And what we kept saying about Amazon is it's not enough to be against the Amazon deal when it's, that's the way that the politics are, the wind is blowing. It's also a real estate deal, because what had happened was, as you know too well, in Long Island City, the city council, you have to get local support before something like that gets zoned. And so they didn't go through local support, but the city council member helped facilitate a real estate rezoning so that real estate developers could build these high rises in Long Island City, the fastest growing city in America, around Amazon, which was sold to Amazon workers before the Amazon deal was even approved. Meanwhile, you have a huge housing, that's where Bernie and AOC had their big rally in Queens. The iconic rally was right next to the housing, the NYCHO, which is the public housing in New York City. So it's just, and they're underfunded, and of course they didn't want to pay taxes. So it's a really important district, and I really, I've been so encouraged by your race, and I think that you've used every platform possible to elevate this conversation in a district that really has lacked that, even when challenged. I think that's the crazy part, is that she's been challenged from the right. She really hasn't been challenged from the left. So I want to thank you for stepping up and running. And if you want to stick around, please stick around. I know you're at a middle of a party, and results are coming in, but just to be clear, like the results that are on New York Times, under 0% reported, or under 1% reported. So feel free if you want to stick around. If you have any other thoughts, we're going to bring in Ingrid in a second. But I love all these women.
I just want to say thank you for using your platform to help grassroots candidates, and thank you, Matriarch, for helping progressive women run grassroots races. Everything all of you do is making such a difference in our world, and I just really thank you all for pushing this whole country in the right direction with all of your effort.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, and I look forward to continuing to partner with all of you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for running, Lauren.
Thank you.
You ran a hell of a race.
Thank you.
Ingrid, hello. Welcome to the Dominique Show.
Thank you so much.
Ingrid Gomez is, speaking of Queens, because we have a very, Queens contingency. Thanks, Lauren. Ingrid, you are one of the founders of the Quip. How do you properly say it? Is it Quip? I've been to your events, yes.
Queens United Independent Progressives.
You've been around, the organization's been around for 2 years, is that correct?
That's right. It was founded just after AOC's win in 2018.
You were a big part of AOC running, and I love pulling back the curtain for folks to see what it took for this, these types of big movements that have had national, international consequences. I love to talk to the folks who are involved on the ground, and you've always been involved everywhere I've gone. You've been a face. So, you're involved in a lot of the Queen's races right now. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening?
Sure. So I've been involved in the AOC race, of course. I think that she's going to do just fine. And of course, I think she's been hit left and right from MCC. Really dirty mailers and texts that I've been getting all week. But I think she's going to do perfectly well. So I expect to see her on the win side. And also, I've been volunteering with Jessica Gonzalez Rojas as well, the AD 34 race, which has been a bit contentious. I'm sure that you've been following. And,
we have, but maybe our audience hasn't. So feel free to dive in.
Yes. So Jessica Gonzalez Rojas is an activist, and she's also someone who's a policy person, a policy wonk, and she worked for the National Latina Reproductive Health Institute, and she was there as the executive director. And last year, she decided she wanted to run for AD 34. And so she began exploring her options and she decided to do it. And so, you know, this race has been very complicated because there's another candidate, Nula O'Doherty Naranjo, who is a community activist. She was also a former prosecutor in Manhattan. And so where it got a little sticky, I would say, is because I think there were certain barbs. I think Nula said that Jessica was a carpetbagger and that she wasn't from the neighborhood. And in fact, Jessica moved in, I think, before Nula did. So I think in 2001. And so, you know, there were those kind of you know, remarks that were made. And I think it's very unfortunate because I respect the two very much. And so there was also the Tiffany Caban endorsement. And so after she endorsed Jessica, I think there was Nula's comment on record that she said, oh, you know, I sort of validated her race, meaning Tiffany's. And so that was also something that was unfortunate because, you know, Tiffany Caban didn't need any validation. Certainly Nula helped incredibly, but, you know, Tiffany did what she did and it was a historic, you know, almost win. So so that's what's been happening with the AD 34. And I am hoping that my candidate, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, is the winner.
This is almost the biggest tragedy of the 2020 cycle, I feel like, is too many challengers. I remember in 2016 and 17 and 18, all we were trying to do is get somebody to run, right? AOC was the first challenger for 14 years, right, to Crowley, you know, who was even willing to be in that position. I'm in New York 16. We still have an overabundance, you know, 4 challengers on the ballot. I think that still mathematically points to an incumbent victory. And, you know, I've been following that assembly race as well. And I also have been a fan of the work of both of those women. And it's really kind of gut wrenching. Even Lauren, right? She's in a race where there's too many progressives, right? And there's not enough anti-establishment votes to go around. So it's interesting that we've arrived as a movement to this place where we actually have too many candidates. And there were some people on the show earlier who actually dropped out, like Ondam in my race, who was like a little bit of a, you know, sacrificial lamb so that the progressives could try to consolidate. But it is, you know, just an observation. I feel like it's the biggest tragedy of this cycle. And I'm interested to see what happens in the future. You know, maybe we need to have more of a vetting process, but we've also talked about how coalitions and how the community needs to be involved in that, right? Is it one big organization from on high that's going to come in? And Matriarch has talked about this. We don't want to colonize a race that's not our race, right? We just want to support the communities from the ground up and not be, you know, coming down and dictating, you know, who the community should support. But we have all these candidates rooted in their communities. And I think a year out, honestly, we need to come together and choose, which is something that we did with the IDC races, for example. We got all of the stakeholders in the community together, and some of those were in unions or in various different organizations, in indivisible groups. And, you know, it's not easy to tell somebody that's decided to run, like, essentially, you're not the candidate, you have to drop out. But to kind of build that power, right, that the establishment already has. And we can't be too fractured or we're never going to win. And it's difficult because it can't be one organization either that's dictating. It really has to be about the community coming together and forming these like alliances. Do you feel like in Queens, because I'm in Westchester, right? So do you feel like there are really strong alliances at this point between all these different groups, the legacy groups that basically predated the Trump election, and then the new groups that have arisen either out of the Bernie movement or out of the anti-Trump movement?
Right. Well, I think certainly, you know, after 2016, a lot of groups began to flourish, like DSA, and they're pretty strong. And I think that, you know, their claim to fame obviously has been AOC's race and Julia Salazar in Brooklyn. I think that, you know, there's been a lot of talk about like who DSA endorsed and who they didn't. I think them as a group and sort of, they feel like sort of like an entity, a separate entity from the other progressive groups. And so my whole sense is that, you know, yes, we should all kind of get together and support a candidate that we feel like they will win, right? Win against an establishment candidate. In this AD 34 race, for example, you know, Dunn Decker is the incumbent. And so we have Joy Chowdhury, Nula O'Doherty, and Jessica Gonzalez. and Angel Cruz. So it's really very likely that this vote will be split and that Dan Decker will win. And you're right, there have been, there is a lot of work to be done in terms of coalition building with DSA, with Indivisible, with, you know, QUIP, and a lot of other progressive organizations.
I think getting everyone to the table early on is part of that, right? Because what happened in my race, for example, is that Jamal Bowman had basically entered the race with the Justice Democrats backing. And then there was a lot of support in the district, though, for Ondum. And so how do you can't rewind the clock and go do things in a different order, right? But you basically have to do that coalition building ahead of time, because the last thing you want is to be kind of pitted against both. I'm ready to take on the establishment, but do I want to be pitted against Justice Democrats? No, of course not, or DSA, or any of these, other left organizations. So I think that coalition building and that long-term coalition building, we've seen a little bit of that tonight on this call, just like how friendly everybody is within the left in New York. Like, we just all know each other. And that actually reminds me of the last time I saw you was at Samelis Lopez's launch, and she's a matriarch candidate. She's also a really close personal friend. I know of both yours and mine. And that's your old district, right? New York 15 in the South Bronx.
That's right. Yes.
Poorest country in the nation. It's also it's very progressive, or it's very blue. It's the bluest Cook score in the nation, D+44.
What is the Cook score for folks that don't know?
It's just the rating of how Democratic it is versus Republican. So it went the most heavily to Obama. It's also like 96% people of color. It's a district that's actually not super gerrymandered. It's right there in the South Bronx. And that's Ingrid's home district. You grew up there? Does your mother still live there?
Yeah, so I did grow up there in the 80s. So it was pretty rough, when I was there, and the early 90s. But what I really appreciate about Samelis's message is that, we're not just the poorest district in the nation. We're resilient people. We picked up, from the ashes. We're like a phoenix rising. And so I really appreciate her really, putting the district in a way like that we've risen. We're strong. We can work together to make this the best district possible. So yes, so I'm really optimistic. I really hope that Samelis wins. And yeah, my heart is there now with her.
And she's a very transformative candidate.
Very much
she's
so.
Incredibly compelling. In the field, I've just never seen anything like it. We rate people's, whether or not they're a supporter on a scale of 1 through 5. This is when you're field organizing, and a 5 is like a hell no, and a 1 is a yes. And I've seen her just move like every person she meets, like from a no to a yes. And so that's what gives me hope in that race.
Yeah, amazing. She's a great communicator too. I think that's one of her gifts. She's able to inspire and motivate. And I think that, she's gonna join the squad, I hope. So, I do think that she would bring that transformative change to the South Bronx with her Homes Guarantee platform and signing on to Medicare for All, because we definitely need Medicare for All. So.
For those of you who don't know a little bit about this district, this is a district that was held by Jose Serrano, who is more progressive on the scale, at least in New York City, or nationwide, I guess, but could, in my opinion, there still was more room to be more progressive. The district, it's opened up, and so there are several people in this race, several current elected officials. It traditionally has very low turnout, which is such a tragedy because of the injustices of the district. And that just shows you where our leaders have prioritized Democratic engagement. I mean, if we, as a machine, I say machine, like the Democratic machine of New York, had put its energy into communities that maybe didn't donate as much as the machine wanted, then we might have a different type of vibrancy. But with that being said, still extremely Democratic. Great minds have come out of the South Bronx, and I know Samelis from the Bernie movement, and she's one thing I think that we've left out, just for those who aren't familiar with her. She grew up homeless. Right. She really worked her way up through the system and has become an extraordinary leader, through all this. So we're going to be watching closely. I mean, just for Yeah,
and
we're getting-
refreshing and refreshing and refreshing.
Yeah.
I can tell actually that even with less than 1% reporting, that turnout is going to be way, 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 way higher than last time. In all of these congressional districts, about 10% of the population are what they call prime Democrats, which are the Democrats who have a really good record of voting in primaries. So only 1 in 10. There are about 300,000 Democrats in each of these districts. So as you're looking at the results, if you're there refreshing as I am, I can see, for example, in Semelis's district, there's about 17,000 votes in, and they're saying that that's less than 1%. Just right there, even though I'm not that good at math, I know that that means we're going to far exceed, you know, the 20,000, 30,000 turnout that we generally have seen in the past in these races. It's also important to bear in mind as you're trying to see the results is that we are actually not going to know unless they're super, super decisive, you know, unless somebody's getting like 90% of votes. They're not even beginning to count the absentee ballots until the 1st of July. Then there's the 4th of July holiday. In a lot of these races, I think I saw a number that there's 700,000 absentee ballots in New York City out. There's over 100,000 in Westchester. So the numbers are going to be through the roof. And it's also like a totally unprecedented cycle, obviously, in every single way possible, including just field. Ingrid, I know that you've been actually out there in the streets volunteering, but all field operations actually ground to a halt for all of March, all of April, all of May. It's only just a little bit of this month that there's, you know, and you're wearing a mask, right, and gloves, and it's only outside instead of doors. So campaigning has had to adapt really rapidly. But what's it like out there in the streets, especially compared to 2018? And you've been out for AOC, right?
Yes, I have. So about, I would say like just a week ago, right? Or this past weekend. Yes, I was out just, you know, canvassing and tabling, I should say. You know, I think it's good that we're able to go out and talk to people in person. But certainly, like you mentioned, you know, everything kind of came to a halt, and the campaigns began to do mutual aid. So I'm sure that the other panelists have talked about that. And so when I was calling for several candidates, for Samelis and for Jessica Gonzalez, it would start with mutual aid, and you know, and then letting them know about this election. And so I think, you know, the candidates have done extremely well. I think they've adapted really well, and you know, I think it's much better than any of us anticipated. So I do believe the mutual aid calls have been extremely helpful, because I know, like, people have said, oh, thank you for calling me. Thank you for asking me how I'm doing. And, you know, connecting people to resources has always been very important, especially during this pandemic.
I know that your organization, Queens United Independent Progressives, and I know you're actually involved in multiple organizations, but that you also endorsed Maloney DeRigo in New York 3, who's also a matriarch candidate, and we've been working very closely with her and her campaign. Can you just tell us a little bit about why you guys chose to support Maloney, and how you think that she'll do, and what kind of race she's run?
Yeah, I mean, I think she's a compelling candidate as well. She's a mom. She's got, you know, the very left platform. And I think, you know, again, from all her endorsements, as you've seen, whether it be Sunrise and whether it be any of the left organizations, everyone is really supportive of her. And I think she has a very good chance of defeating the incumbent, Tom Suozzi.
It's so interesting too, because I know, Nomiki, obviously I became aware of you at, 2016 and the platform for the Bernie campaign. And I feel like now we really have an identity as progressives. Like, we have our own platform. It actually is the 2016 Democratic platform, but a lot of Democrats actually don't adhere to their own platform. And I love to show it to people and be like, you believe all this, right?
Right.
Because then we're fighting for the same thing. Or you actually don't believe what you say you believe, or represent.
I mean, especially with Suozzi. It's so crazy to me that he, Tom Suozzi is basically acting like a Republican in a district that, they say, oh, it's Long Island, it's conservative. That's just not true. As I said earlier in the show, the person who used to hold that seat was the head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Not necessarily like the best committee, but he wasn't afraid of being a Democrat. This guy literally was pretending to be Republican, like the IDC sort of situation. And it's mind-blowing, because I don't know how they can receive resources. Yeah, you can't vote with Trump on immigration. Be for the wall, support ICE, and that's just a few things. I mean, there's dog whistles, there's just how he hasn't provided resources to his community or shown up for his community. And I think it's I don't know what it'll take to get to the point where the Democrats don't give resources to candidates who just can't pass like the simplest of tests in the Democratic Party, not to mention, the bigger ones that we should all be fighting for no matter what. But like taking money from Raytheon, like I don't, how is this happening?
No, it's very true. And I think, in terms of Raytheon being a funder of several races, right? Others in Queens. But I do believe, the money that you accept definitely speaks a lot to who you are. Because again, a lot of left-leaning candidates are not taking corporate monies. They're not taking real estate money. There's also been a pledge, I think, for Sunrise that, you don't take any money that from fossil fuel industry. So I think we are sort of moving in the direction of like, yes, if you want to be a left candidate, you don't take money from Raytheon. You don't take money from Rebney, from any Rebney. So yeah,
Rebney being the real estate, it's essentially the real estate industry without having to go down the rabbit hole of New York.
Real estate lobby, yeah. Ingrid, are you going to run for office?
So that's certainly something that I've been thinking about. But when we're ready, we'll mention it. We'll announce it.
Well, you gotta let us know. You're a Queens gal. We love it. There's been a lot of Queens tonight, and I just want to remind everybody that Queens is where it's happening.
That's right.
Parts of Queens, the most progressive, not only most progressive part of the country right now, most diverse part of the country. So if you want to see that, there's a reason why AOC made such gains in Queens and the Bronx. It's because that's where the movement building is, I think, being born out of. Stick around, Ingrid. Can you stick around for a bit, and we're going to talk about some of the races? Awesome.
Sure, thank you.
So we have Alex and Monica who have just joined. Thank you for joining the show. We finally have a man.
No, we had Autumn and Mel.
That's right, earlier. I was just saying because and Kelly can attest to this. Kelly, who's on our show, and this is Dominique from Matriarch, our political director. Kelly, we always talk about how there are no women in media, and definitely not online media. And I'm really proud of unintentionally putting together this show with an 85% female.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah. So now we come to the portion of the results. The first part of the show, for those of you who are tuning in, I think we've got quite a few who are watching right now, has been about introducing you guys to challenger candidates that are running against the establishment in New York, giving you guys the lay of the land. We might have a few people join because we're working with their schedules. I mean, they're running for office right now, so some of them have election night parties. But now we're looking at the results, Dominique has talked a little bit about turnout, and I think I want to touch on some of the districts that we may not have discussed. There's some city council races. Jabari Brisbort, he's not running for city council, he's running for state senate, but he ran a spirited campaign just a couple of years ago as a DSA member, as a Green Party member. He was the first, I believe. I think he was the first DSA endorsed candidate, and it looks like he's got a very strong organization in Brooklyn where he's running for state senate. But I'm going to go to, before we get to some of these races, I'm going to go to Monica first. Monica, and I know you have a relationship with Dominique, so maybe Dominique has some more insights because you guys have been working on some races together. But Monica, you've been working on the ground. You're tapped into the New York elections. I mean, what are your initial thoughts? Like, what are the races you're watching tonight?
So definitely CD16, and I'll be watching that into July. I live in CD16.
Which district?
The congressional district 16. That's Bowman, Engel, Fink. I was an Andon fan. Okay, I'll be real. I carried his.
He was on earlier. We love him.
Yes. Well, I watched him. I was with him this morning at 6 a.m. For Sam Elise. So I've been up since 4:30 because we were at her campaign headquarters at 5:30 before Jenny Zhang, the campaign manager, even got there. So yeah, so I'm keeping their schedule today. But yeah, big Andom fan. Been watching Engel Bowman this entire time. Spoke to Engel's campaign many times. Let's pretend I was trying to help him understand his weaknesses, and then gave up. I'm a district leader in Pelham, actually, and I am a Queens girl. I'm from Jackson Heights, actually, so AOC's district in particular, originally. So yeah, that's the one I'm watching the closest. But since I was in CD15 this morning, campaigning for Sam Elise, that I'm watching that one very closely too. Watching Congressional District 17 a little bit because we're sandwiched in between there. But yeah, let me give Alex a chance.
And 17, just clarify, because we have a little bit of a national audience. I'm just gonna, also just mute you because we're getting a little bit of feedback, Monica. But yeah, when you guys mention races, because we have a national audience here that may not be as familiar with the ADs and the city council, just kind of give a reference point of like where it is, who's running, and what it represents.
Sure.
So New York 17 is actually Nita Lowey's district. She's been in office for 30 years. She's retiring. So Monica and I live in New York 16. We're sandwiched between, right, 2 open seats where you have like a dozen different candidates running, right? Because it's this free for all. What that also means though is that you have a much lower win number. So Sam Elise could maybe have 10,000 votes and win, but somebody that's challenging Engel would need 30,000 votes to win because they're up against an incumbent. So the math is really different, but it's also divided up a lot more ways. And one thing to bear in mind is that redistricting is about to happen. So it's really important to pay attention, not just to your race, but to honestly all the races in the House, but especially neighboring districts, because you might end up, I might be in New York 15 or in New York 17 by the time the next election comes around.
Great point. Very good point. I mean, New York is likely to lose a couple of seats because we're losing population. New York State, it's based on the state, not on the city. Although after COVID, who knows? We're in the middle of a census here. And then, other states, like we covered Georgia, and Georgia's likely to pick up a seat or two. So you're seeing a lot of these dynamics. Oh my goodness, wait, before I get to you, Alex, I have to say, we have a special unexpected guest that decided to crash the party. This is a big party, guys. Sam Cedar is joining us. What up, Sam? Sam without a mustache. So Sam, before I get to you, I was just about to introduce Alex. You're joining a packed house. We've had a predominantly female show up until about 5 minutes ago. But Alex, Alex, you have been extremely active online. You're super active in politics. If I'm correct, you are in Maloney's district, Tom Swazi's district.
Yes, Maloney, Dorigo.
Can you turn your volume up a little bit, Alex? I'm sorry.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Oh my God, the internet's blowing up because Sam's here. Just want to share that with you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually in Maloney. I'm in Dorigo's district, and I happily voted for her today. Also got some of my family members to vote for her as well. And I've been dealing with Tom Swazi and his centrist Democrat ways, as well as the guy who was before him, Steve Israel, who was also pretty much inside of the same camp for his entire career in Congress. For people that don't know, the 3rd district on Long Island, which used to be the 2nd district, is pretty much this area of Long Island is right where it starts to really kind of get into that more middle of the road Democrat, Chamber of Commerce Democrat type person, and then really just kind of go off the deep end with Lee Zeldin out, when you get way out east and it starts to get really red out there. But I was very excited by Dorigo's campaign because I think it's kind of the first time inside of this district where we've seen the really sort of progressive policies that people are very interested in, like Medicare for All and talking about the Green New Deal. And the thing about Swazi is that, he's this guy who is sort of a purportedly environmentalist type guy. He cut his teeth on environmental policy when he was sort of like the mayor of Glen Cove way back in the day. And he had all these sort of bona fides about, his environmental policies. But he's sort of a vegetarian between meals when it comes to environmental policy. It's not something that he really seems to really care about. And that's like something that's very important to me. So yeah, that's kind of the deal out here.
Sam, you're up. Can I say where you are or no? An undisclosed location.
I'm up in the 19th district.
Okay, what are you feeling upstate right now? Even though you're normally based in New York City.
Nothing. There was no primary for this district. Delgado appears to be running uncontested, and I imagine, at least in the presidential election, Bernie's going to. I would be surprised if Bernie doesn't win, or at least do well in this district, to the extent that it means anything. This Columbia County I think, was the one that gave Zephyr Teachout her highest vote tallies when she ran against Cuomo. This is the Democrats in this area, I think, are firmly progressive, is my sense. But beyond that, I'm looking at, like, I don't know if you just saw my jaw drop a little bit, but it was looking like McGrath lost her home county to Charles Booker in Kentucky. Now, this was reported, I guess, like 2 hours ago, and this is from, I guess, Mitch McConnell's former chief of staff. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's up to date. I haven't checked. I just saw that on Twitter, but I'm looking forward to Booker winning there as opposed to McGrath. So that would be a good thing as well. I know you're talking about New York, but
No. This is important. I think there's themes here too. I mean, one of the things we've been talking about continuously, just for those of you who are just tuning in, the first part of the show was having a lot of these challengers on and talking to them about the dynamics of their races. And some of the challengers who had been running, we had Andaman, who had run in Bowman's district, and Amanda Frankel, who ran against Nadler as well with Lindsay Boylan, and just talking about the coalitions and how at different stages of the campaign there's been growth. And I think what's really amazing about Booker's race is just to see how much momentum he's had at the end, and what that would have really meant if maybe how it would have happened earlier. I mean, you guys are all very active in politics. What does it mean to have that early support, and and how do you think it would have played a role in this race with Booker?
Well, I mean, if you're asking me, I mean, if Booker had the support of Chuck Schumer, as opposed to him directing all of the money to McGrath, I mean, I think it would. I mean, I don't know if he's going to win, but he would have won by more. And I don't know that either one of them has a significant chance of beating McConnell. But I gotta feel like if there is a chance of having, the polls show that Booker has, maybe, I don't know, like a 7 or 8 point advantage. But if there is going to be an upset, it's going to come from a candidate like Booker, as opposed to a candidate like McGrath. Like McGrath. I mean, she has a ceiling, and I think they're both probably long shots. But if that long shot's going to come in, I would imagine it's Booker, because I think he has the opportunity to sort of motivate voters that don't normally participate. She is just going to be fishing in the same waters, the same sort of pool of voters who have provided losses to Mitch McConnell every time somebody's run against him, frankly. And so I think I think it'll be interesting. And he's a very dynamic candidate. I interviewed him. Maybe it was last August, actually. And I was really impressed and frankly sort of surprised that there wasn't more support for him, because, look, even if both of them are going to lose, a loss to Booker, the issues that he can highlight in that campaign against Mitch McConnell are just far more relevant to the nation as a whole. With McGrath sitting there going like, I'm going to work with Donald Trump. Where is that constituency? Even Joe Biden has had to sort of, back off that. And so where is that constituency within the Democratic Party? It doesn't feed into a national narrative. I doubt it feeds into a local narrative. And so it's just sort of, it's neither fish nor fowl. And I would rather lose with a fish or a fowl than to lose with neither, frankly.
Now, Miki, you've heard me say this on a lot of campaigns, but I think like time is actually your most valuable resource of all. With candidates like Samelis, like she's just hitting her stride really too with fundraising and with, honestly, the Bernie endorsement. I mean, that's awesome, but a lot of people already voted by absentee before that endorsement even came in. And so, if it's a gradually building ramp, that's awesome. But $1 million coming in, or in your case, Nomi, 500,000 coming in 4 days before the election, there's only so much that you can do with it if you don't have time. And especially the grassroots playbook of like building those coalitions over time, moving that needle over time. Cynthia Nixon, she announced March 19th for a September primary. That is not enough time for anybody, right? To people don't know who you are. They don't trust you. How do you build that trust? I think there's another thing that Sam just touched on that I'd love to just throw to Monica. The racial aspect of what I'm just seeing of the double standard of what somebody like Bowman is being held to, I feel like, and maybe Ondam as well, but Booker as well, for this moment, a leader like Elliot Engel, even more so than Amy McGrath, is just like not what the moment calls for, in my opinion. But there's a lot of, it's really hard to trust Bowman, or I just don't feel comfortable with Bowman. That today I honestly like had a moment where my head was going to explode, and I felt like, that there's racial undertones to this, and it's very well-meaning people, and it's people who have like Black Lives Matter yard signs, here in suburbia, but who, have all these doubts about candidates of color. That, how do you feel about that, Monica, being also in New York 16 and
Dominique didn't mention, but by trade, I'm a pediatric hospitalist. So a lot of my patients are in Congressional District 16, Yonkers and the Woodlawn section are two places I see patients. And I started asking them. I have a lot of patients of color. Actually, that's pretty much my entire patient population. Do you vote? Why do you vote? Why don't you vote? And I experienced this while I was in CD15 this morning. A lot of people do not vote. They either feel like it's not something that they do. Some people told me they can't because they had been convicted of something, or they're undocumented. And in a majority minority district like CD16, it is so important at this point to see someone who looks like them, to inspire them. Someone who understands the urgency of criminal justice reform or healthcare reform. I mean, let me tell you, just this whole pandemic, what it brought to the forefront of how we treat people differently when they come to our doorstep, or how they get to our doorstep, if they get to our doorstep. It's very important for your representative ultimately to look like someone that can represent you. And of course, somebody who is not a minority can represent a majority minority district, but you have to actually be on the ground, talking to the people, knocking on the doors of people who aren't coming to you as you're flanked on two sides by your posse. Listen to the people and what their concerns are as they evolve. And so I felt like Bowman did. I really felt like Andon did. So, I'm going to get over my heartbreak over that, since he seems to be getting over it. But it's just invaluable to have someone who can actually represent the district in ways that they actually grew up there, understand it, evolved with the district, understand the people.
So I'm looking at some of the results right now, and let me just remind everybody that we have so little information at this point. Very little information in terms of turnout, but it seems like for whatever reason, more results are coming out of the Bowman Engel race than any other race. So I'm not sure if resources, I don't know how the Board of Elections works when it comes to that, but it's the only race. Is anybody else seeing this too? It's the only race that seems to be getting.
Well, it's saying it's less than 1%, and yet 13,000 votes.
Yeah.
That's enormous. Are you telling me 137,000 people voted out of less than 300,000 Democrats? That's like 50% instead of 10% participation. I mean, that would just blow all the models out of the water, in which case this is like a super historic election. If this is what we're seeing across the board, I mean, I was doing the math on New York 15 too. If you're really at 1%, and there's already 23,000 votes counted, do that math. You're looking at like enormous participation compared to the past, where so many people in New York. And another thing that happened when we helped flip the Senate, which some of us were involved in, the state Senate, is also that we enacted voting rights reform in New York.
Right.
And so we have
Good
early
point.
voting for the first time. We've made it easier for people to vote. And there's still a long way to go. But finally, with absentee ballots being available to everyone due to the pandemic, everyone has the ability to vote by mail, to vote on their own schedule, even if they can't get a sitter, they're working 2 shifts that day. And so that low participation, and you see this a lot with candidates, it's frequently an attack. It's been definitely an attack on Bowman, on many progressive candidates, is their voting record. But of course, only 10% of the population actually has a very good voting record. And part of that is because we've made it up until this point in New York extremely difficult actually for people to vote. And we've seen even today all kinds of funny business, right? People being dropped from the rolls, not being handed both ballots is something that we heard a lot because there was a presidential ballot. People are confused. The presidential was on, then it was off, then it was on again. In New York. They canceled it, and then a judge actually reinstated the primary. And the poll workers, they're working a really long day. They're not trained really well. They're not paid very well. They're well-meaning people, but we're seeing a lot of messiness. But I think we're moving in the right direction as far as participation. And I think that's something that we can already see as we refresh the New York Times results pages, is that it's looking like, we're at 50% instead of 10% participation, which is good news, I believe, for our movement in the long run.
I have a feeling that under 1% is incorrect. I saw somewhere else that in that the Bowman Angle race that 30% was reporting,
where
which
did I
would
just
make
see that
more
too?
sense, I think,
I
with
just saw
those
that. Yeah.
I
I'm
saw
trying to
that
figure out where.
on Twitter, but I don't know
Political
if that's
polls has
but
it.
that would be more, I think that would make more sense.
I mean, if that's the case, and maybe we can hyper target and see what parts of the district have counted their ballots, but he is, if that's the case, he's doing very well against
It's looking
Engel.
good. It's
looking very good. And with that said, Alex, you're out in Maloney's district and Swazi's district. She's doing pretty well right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my camera is looking terrible right now, but that's just how it's gonna have to be. I'm holding out hope for her. I think it's a tough race for any progressive, this district. It's just a question of getting people out to vote, and I know that's like an annoying drum to be beating all the time, but the truth is, way less than half the people inside of my district are actually like going out to vote, and these typically these margins are like not that wide in a lot of these elections. But I'm definitely holding out hope for her, and my fingers are absolutely crossed. It would be great. I don't know if you remember this. It wasn't that long ago, but like Swazi was in sort of a dogfight for a little while with AOC over the House Ways and Means Committee because which she lost basically that fight. But Swazi, I think this has probably been said before, but for people who are not totally familiar, he's like kind of an under the radar guy. He, does a lot of stuff that impacts the Democratic Party. He's a Chamber of Commerce, no labels type of politician, and that's the kind of stuff that he pushes. And he basically, when you're on the House Ways and Means Committee, which basically writes all of the tax laws in the United States, when you're on the House Ways and Means Committee, you pretty much have a free ticket to do whatever you want because every major corporation and interest is going to want to be writing you a check. And every major corporation and interest, not every single one, but he's gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations over the years from the, banks, real estate, you name it. He's gotten a check from those people. So I think it would be a great thing if he wasn't the person representing this district. And I think that he is sort of representative of my least favorite aspect of sort of the Democratic Party, which is this kind of very middle of the road, behind the scenes cutting deals and mostly just doing whatever the corporate interest kind of wants.
Yeah, I mean, it's the one tragedy of this race is I don't think this election is I don't think people recognized how dangerous he is. Ingrid, you're in Queens. You also Quip endorsed Maloney, but I'm watching some of these Queens races, and just a reminder, folks who are tuning in, first off, like, subscribe, share, do all that stuff because Kelly's gonna kill me, and Sam will too. But aside from that, I'm looking at we have a Queens borough president, and for those of you who aren't from Queens, the borough president is like the president of the borough, and that's the manager of Queens. But while we have this progressive Western Queens movement happening that is AOC, a lot of it came from AOC, and we saw the No Amazon movement. Alternatively, you have Southeast Queens, which is the machine is very alive and well there. I think that might be a more accurate way of saying it. And I'm watching this borough president. Granted, numbers are very low. Our progressive guy, or at least mine, Costa Constantinidis, is coming in third right now. He's a council member. It's not looking great. So, and what are your thoughts, Ingrid? You're watching this closely.
Yeah, so, I'm also rooting for Costa. I think his record on environmental activism is really, you can't compare it to anyone else's. So yeah, I mean, I was pushing for him. I have a lot of respect for Donovan, but again, I think he's been taking a lot of revenue money, which is the real estate board money. And I know that he got a whole bunch of money recently. So I really hope that, Costa's numbers improve. The night is still young, as I like to say. But yeah, I mean, I think Donovan may take it, though. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. And that's, and that's also the new machine boss. So Joe Crowley was the congressman. Joe Crowley, who AOC defeated, was also the boss of the Queens machine, and very, very powerful in New York City politics, New York State politics, and of course was going to end up, potentially being in leadership higher up. But Gregory Meeks took over, and I think there's been big questions about how powerful the machine still is in New York, given the fact that you've had a lot of Western Queens representatives who really, I mean, I'll give them a little bit of a cover. I don't know how you operate in Queens prior to AOC without having warmed up in some way, shook hands with the machine, how you could get elected. And so you've seen people like Senator Janaris and Jessica Ramos who came in against the IDC, and Costa Constantinidis, they've really pulled very progressive. Senator Janaris is the deputy leader of the Senate now, and he endorsed Bernie. That was huge that he bucked the system. But now, I mean, this is the real test. Like, how powerful is that machine?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think with Southeast Queens, there was sort of that pull of the community, the African-American community, who was going to vote alongside, whatever Meeks wants. But I also, that's also, kind of undervaluing, Donovan's own contributions to the area, because he's very well respected as well. So, yeah.
I am just seeing for New York 16, I want to interject, that all of the votes that we're seeing counted so far are from the Bronx. So it's a district that saddles the Bronx and Westchester, and about 2/3 of the registered Democrats are in Westchester. I'm imagining that the Bronx will pull more towards Bowman than Westchester will. So it's a big question about whether or not, Westchester will save Elliot Engel. And I believe when they're saying 36%, that they're referring to the in-person votes. Somebody on here, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but the absentees are not going to be counted until July 1st. And so we have 100,000 absentee ballots that are outstanding in Westchester that will remain outstanding into next week, into possibly the week after, over 700,000 absentee ballots in New York City that are going to remain outstanding. So I think even when we're talking about 30% of results, we're talking about people that voted in person, either early voting, which we haven't had before, or in-person voting today, and not all of the absentee ballots. So all of these races are going to just remain in suspense. I feel terrible for the candidates not to have that closure, but I think we're not going to know the results of any of these really until July.
Yeah.
I think we have like AOC's win. She won in a landslide, so I think she got
bum ba bum. Like we needed that.
Which I think is no surprise, right? So yeah.
You know, one of the things I find interesting, she was running negative ads on the last couple of days, and was really hitting the fundraising hard. And there was really, I mean, you know, I think it was in March, maybe she had internal polling that showed her up by something like 50% or something to that effect I had read. And that to me indicates, you know, that she is really focused on at the very least leveraging her power and extending it beyond her district, you know. And I think that you know, that's not a terribly surprise, but I also think it, you know, it opens the door to want to crush your opponent in that way in your district. You want to send a message to the rest of the state. And
what do you guys think is next for her? Do you think Schumer? Do you think where do
Chuck
you think
Schumer's
she's,
coming up in 2022, and somebody's got to run against him. I mean,
it's also a big risk, though. You have to keep that in mind.
It's a big risk.
That's a huge risk for someone like her.
But there is
anyone.
And you know, I spoke to her the other day on the show, and she appreciates this dynamic. There is big value in making Chuck Schumer think that she may run against him over the next. I mean, we will see material benefits from that as Democrats, and he will, you know, until that day where all the filings are done for that primary, he will be looking over his shoulder the entire time, and that is a very, very healthy dynamic for folks on the left, for Chuck Schumer to be afraid that he's going to get primaried from the left and to be worried about it. And so it's going to pay benefits just in the potential that she may do that will pay benefits, you know, much like you know, all the things that Governor Nixon has been able to accomplish in the past couple of years.
I saw that she pulled in $10.3 million. That's her war chest right now. So I think she is a formidable, you know, challenger for Schumer, and I do look forward to seeing what she does next.
And just for those of you who are tuning in, Ingrid has been extremely involved in the AOC movement from, I mean, when I say the origins, is it fair to say like first few people to work with her?
I think when I heard about her was in 2017, and I was watching her race closely. And then around March or April of 2018 is when I began to get more involved in her race. So yeah, so we were out there, you know, canvassing, texting, calling. It was one of the most exciting races I've ever been part of.
So, I mean, another aspect of this, and it's not just for AOC, it's really for all the incumbents, because of the dynamics of this election. We have electoral reform for the first time ever, early voting for the first time ever, COVID, mail-in ballots. It's been extremely hard for, obviously, grassroots candidates to gauge where their successes are, but I think also for incumbents. I mean, they may have more money to buy ads, and you might be hearing a lot more of those ads because they just don't want to have a situation where someone comes out of the woodwork and is really able to take them on. And that might be why Engel had 5,000 mailers sent to your house, Dominique, in the last few weeks, or Swazi sent 5,000 to your house, Alex. There's just no sense. And even looking at these numbers, which again, not really indicative of much because it's so early. I mean, I'm looking at Carolyn Maloney's race right now. It's under 1% reporting, but I still think that Carolyn Maloney is annihilating her competitors right now. And I know for a fact I got 5 or 6 mailers from her. There's a lot to be said there. That's Western Queens. She represents Western Queens where the progress is happening. So if Carolyn Maloney is annihilating the challengers that poured a lot of money, that there's a lot to be said in the power of her pocketbook.
But also, I think she represents other parts as well. I think the Upper East Side and I think Side-Town. So there are areas that I think are going to be traditionally supportive of her. But yeah, I'm interested in seeing how she did in Western Queens. And if her numbers are really good, then we'll see. But my feeling is that, you know, her numbers are not going to be as good in Western Queens, but more in Manhattan.
Yes.
Well, I think that part of the problem is what Dom was talking about before, with there being multiple challengers and it's splitting the vote. And, you know, that seems to be a major problem right now. But really what it is it's the overcorrection to the correction. So it's ultimately a good thing because the correction needed to happen. You know, AOC kind of brought this wave, and now there's so many candidates and it's hurting them. And then we need to move a little bit back. And, you know, like you were saying, Dominique, like, how do you do that? Like, who decides? I don't, you know, I'm not sure. Like, who decides who runs as the progressive candidate?
Right. We don't need 5 people to challenge Schumer. We need one. We need one good one that everyone can get behind. And we especially don't need different progressive groups to back different candidates in the same race, because then we're pitted against each other. Then we're going backwards as far as coalition building, right? We're making enemies of each other.
I mean, I mean, and that's like, you guys would know more about, are there a lot of candidates out there that want to do that want to fight each other, you know, like in the early days of deciding to run? Like,
well, they're not going to just drop out of their own accord, right? They need to have, and we did this in the IDC races. We all got in the room and we have 2 challengers, and we're never going to be able to challenge these guys, you know, until we have one. So fight it out, ask all the questions, have a big argument, and be like, this is the one that the grassroots support, and tell the other guy, this is not your moment. Sorry, we'll support you in the future, but you've got to drop out. What happened in New York 16 is Andam, you know, fell on his sword just in early June. However, you know, we lost like a year as far as all being on the same side. And I don't blame him one bit for that. I actually blame this top-down endorsement process where there's like an anointed one, you know, from outside. And the grassroots in the district are like, wait, who, what, how, right? We want to be involved, and it has to be from the bottom up. And so I think there's room in the movement for big organizations that are nationwide, and for small local organizations, for unions to come together around the table early on. And I mean, more than a year out. And when there are too many challengers, it's up to us to have our own forums, to have our own debates, to have our own hot seat for them. And then to say, you know, listen, it's not your turn, but we'll back you next time, and leave, you know, as one big happy family. You know, even if that's not easy news to break. And the candidates are not going to know how to do that themselves. They're not going to be able to do that themselves. Just decide all of a sudden to drop out, you know, especially when you called everyone you know and asked for money. Like,
yeah, I just meant, you know, candidates that would be like, well, I don't care what you say. I'm still gonna stay in the race. Like, you know.
Yeah, I really believe the way to do that is to bring everyone to the table in the grassroots and include those big groups that want to be involved, those nationwide groups in the conversation. They can help to facilitate that. You know, if you're WFP, if you're DSA, if you're Justice Democrats, you can be at the table too, but you need to sit with the stakeholders in the district who've also been doing the work of building that organizing infrastructure that's now there. You know, in Westchester, we flipped the county, and then we flipped the state. And so we all know each other and we've worked together. You can't just like ignore the existing organizing infrastructure in the district. You have to tap into it in a way where you're supporting it, but you're not colonizing it.
So it made me think about, you know, the 2021 races, which are going to be ranked choice voting. And I think that that's really going to be an interesting thing to watch, because I believe that, you know, more candidates are actually, it's a good thing, right? Because people can rank their candidates, and a lot more candidates will be willing to work together in the sense of, okay, so choose me as number 1, and you can choose him as number 2, and vice versa. And I think even unions can, you know, endorse several people. So it's really going to change the game, I think, in many ways. And I'm looking forward to seeing how ranked choice voting really affects like turnout and who wins and who gets support. Because I think maybe, you know, people will get, like 2 people will get the same support from the WFP, let's say. So we'll see.
I'm curious from you guys who have worked on campaigns, if the development of more grassroots groups and sort of the growth of social media has created more leverage to convince candidates to drop out. That is, there's more transparency to sort of like the backroom to the extent that there is more transparency to sort of the backroom dealings and the more opportunity for that to get public, if candidates are feeling more pressure to maybe, suck it up and swallow a little bit of pride or hubris and see more advantage to being seen as a team player.
It has to be overwhelming, I guess. You really just have to have all the groups come to an agreement. And sometimes, it's a bloody knockout fight to get to that point. And there are some people that are not in agreement, but you have to agree that more than one challenger means the incumbent is going to win, 95% of the time. And, we have to come together sooner. And I'm glad that in my district we finally have, but, Ingrid, I also just want to say really quick, the ranked choice, that's just for New York City. So we're not going to see that in the congressional races. It's a shame, especially in these races like 15 and 17, where you have so many candidates and you can win with 12% or with 20%, and without having, that large buy-in. It would have been great to have ranked choice, like in Sameli's race, for example.
If I can just add one thing about the organizations, maybe the big elephant in the room. Some of these organizations are doing it for reasons. They want to support candidates. They want to build on the ground, organizing. They're internally, they're not top down. They're actually grassroots up. And then some are top down, and some make money off the campaigns. And I mean, that is the big elephant in the room in New York politics, is there are progressive organizations who will push a candidate. It doesn't mean that the candidate's not great. I mean, many times they are great. It's just they will push their agenda and push that candidate earlier to raise the money because they get paid for fields, they get paid for other vendorships. And I think that's where we get into like the little the shady aspect of New York politics, because it's not just a DNC thing. This happens in progressive organizations as well. And so, if there's one thing I'll add, it's that I think we have to have more Democratic-led organizations before we start having this conversation about being at the table, because lots of folks feel indebted to these organizations, not necessarily understanding the big picture, or honored that they have their support, not understanding, 4 months down the line, they're going to have to cut them a check for $400,000 to do field.
It's interesting too, because you see these organizations and you maybe think that when you get their endorsement that it means XYZ, but what we're seeing here is there are certain organizations that might be putting like $500,000 into one race. They've endorsed the neighboring district, but they're putting $50,000 into that one. And, it's a little bit of a head scratcher. It can be frustrating, especially with some of these candidates like Sameli's or like Maloney, where we feel like they're really worthy candidates and there's just like not enough being invested into their campaigns by the organizations that are investing a lot into other races, right? How is that determined exactly? And I do want to say too, that data, it all has to do with like the long term too. If you run a race in the Bronx and it's unsuccessful, but you get all the data from that race, you're that much, further ahead for the next race. So it's not always about just the individual campaigns, as invested as we might be, as grassroots people and individual candidates and campaigns, but it's not always just about that, but the much bigger picture. And when you look at these organizations and why they choose to run someone here or run someone there, if you have the data from the Caban race, for example, you can see which exact election district she did the best in, and you think, that's where we can run someone for city council and know that they'll be successful, is looking at your past data. So if you have the data from a lot of campaigns like the Cynthia Nixon race, the Zephyr Teachout race, all the IDC challengers races, then you start to really stockpile a lot of data and a lot of power.
Absolutely. And I think that, in 2019, when the DA race, the Queen's DA race went on, DSA was, gathering data, right? They first, I think that, they said, well, I don't know what kinds of chances she'll have to win. But I think there was a point where the momentum just started, and all these organizations started to back Tiffany Caban, and WFP was one of them. And they sort of took over in some ways. But, you're absolutely right. I think DSA was very interested in seeing the numbers, where she was going to do very strongly, because I think what they were hoping to do is really run someone, not only in council, but citywide. So
I think you're 100% correct.
Know me, I gotta jump or
Sam,
I'm gonna have a mini
thank
revolt with my children.
He has two little baby terrorists who are running.
Well, one's not so baby, but she's a terrorist.
Progressive terrorists.
Thanks, everybody.
Sam, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
I'm gonna have to jump super soon too, but I want to give you credit. You know, you were talking about how we have so many women on this panel. You know, there was a League of Women Voters debate in our district, Monica, my district, and I was just so shocked that not only do we have 4 male candidates, right, 3 challengers left after Ondam dropped out, plus Engel, so we have four male candidates. But not only that, the League of Women Voters debate was actually moderated by 2 male moderators. So the League of Women Voters event is 6 men on the screen, right? So I think that making the effort to center, you know, our own perspectives and our voices. And I found in these conversations with Matriarch too, there's really, you know, what was it like to run for office? What's it like to live, you know, income free for a year? Or what is the personal sacrifice? Or, you know, do you really spend 6 hours a day calling everyone you know and asking them for money, and then calling a bunch of people you don't know and also asking them for money? What someone like Ondam had to do, who just, you know, then dropped out before the finish line, you know, to raise $300,000, it's like, you know, blood and sweat and tears. And, you know, Monica, I know I signed you up to spend the day in New York 15. I actually have an injury to my leg, so I wasn't able to be there myself. So I tried to push all my friends to support some Ellis, but being willing to put like your sweat where your mouth is, right? Everyone's like behind their keyboard and like on Twitter and like talking shit on Facebook. But to be actually willing to go out there, it's a really powerful thing. Or on the phones, you know, if we're stuck now with COVID, not being able to be doing, you know, in-person voter contact. But it's a really powerful thing. So if you're out there, not only should you subscribe to the Nomiki Show, but please support progressive candidates. Please think about running for office. It is an enormous sacrifice, but you're also doing, you know, an enormous service to the entire movement. And somebody like Ondam, for example, in our race, he just elevated the conversation and brought such depth to the conversation.
Totally.
That it's priceless, you know, whoever wins. But especially, I feel like he also moved Jamal to the left and moved Jamal into like a more substantive position where he had to, you know, really think about what he was saying and why he was taking certain stances. He couldn't just, you know, just run to Engel's left. And I think that that's such a healthy thing. So I just really want to encourage everybody to volunteer on progressive campaigns. It's a really powerful thing. And even if you lose, you know, Cynthia Nixon came out like, we need to legalize marijuana as a racial justice issue. Like, obviously she lost, but literally the next day, Cuomo was in favor of legalizing marijuana, where he didn't even want to decriminalize it the day before. And so sometimes pressure can just move that needle so exponentially that it is worth it. Even, you know, even if you're just getting that message out there to young girls everywhere, to people of color, to people of different, you know, religious backgrounds or ethnicities, that you can run for office too. If you look at, you know, we've had a couple of these Year of the Woman, and like we still have not even 23% of Congress is women. So we need more women candidates. We need more women in the conversation in politics, and also women campaign managers, women field directors.
Progressive women.
Progressive, yes. And then we're held to such a different standard. And of course, these things go for, you know, if you're a racial minority as well. But women, you know, the level of vitriol that somebody like Lindsey Boylan has, you know, just like been burned at the stake for like daring to run, right? And I think that that is reserved for female candidates, you know, or what color of lipstick she wears, or what kind of heel, or if the hair should be up or down. You know, there's still a lot of misogyny. So we need to, you know, make it our mission to support one another. And I feel like the sisterhood is such a powerful thing. And Nomiki, I want to thank you for what you've done with Matriarch and tonight, and including all these different diverse voices and helping to build that. I think it's meant a lot to the Matriarch candidates. You're in such an isolating position. You're like locked in a closet calling people, asking them for money. Like, no one understands what you're going through, that you have no income, that you've put it all on the line. And of course it feels personal. It's your name, it's your reputation. Like, it's the rest of your life where people are going to Google you, and whatever kind of nasty smears about your divorce or whatever, you know, is gonna be in your life. So it takes so much bravery, and connecting these women to one another and the camaraderie that we have in the left in New York now is just such a powerful thing. So I'd love to see us all, you know, continuing to support one another into the 2021 cycle. You know, it was so great to see all the different candidates tonight from all the different districts, and they all know each other, and they all have a friendship and a sense of camaraderie and a really strong shared platform. And that's such a powerful thing. And I think we've come a really long way as a movement. So I'm excited and grateful.
Dominique, just for those who are chiming in right now, Dominique is the political director of Matriarch, and she's just very tapped into New York politics and movements, and every candidate that's come on tonight has been very close to her, and she's given a lot of guidance. She's a newborn there, and she just had foot surgery, so thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a very, you've offered a lot of progressive perspective.
And Monica, I know you've been up since 4 a.m., so if you need to run as well.
I'm going to do a quick little update on the races because a lot's happened, but not a lot's happened. And guys, feel free to chime in. I know this is a big panel, so it's a little hard, especially because there's like a little bit of a time delay, but thanks Dominique. And thank you, Clara. So we have a little bit, this race, the 15th district, which is, we keep talking about the Semelis district. Semelis is running in the South Bronx. There's been a lot of money that's poured in, and granted, still under 1%. Dominique just chimed up, but it's 26,000 votes in. Usually it's a very low turnout district. Now keep in mind, 26,000 votes, under 1%, doesn't seem right, but of that, 30% is going to Richie Torres, who is a council member. A lot of money poured into his race, a lot of support. Now, the other people in that race, I think it was really important, and you have Michael Blake, who's an assembly member and a vice chair of the DNC, ran for public advocate in a race that I was in. Ruben Diaz, who is basically a Republican. He's crazy. He's a council member, and that was sort of the unifying opponent in this race, was blocking this man who doesn't believe in a woman's right to choose and is anti-LGBTQ, not to mention a lot of other things. Semelis right now is coming in just under Ruben Diaz, which is extraordinary because she's not an elected official. Because right below her is an elected official, Ydanis Rodriguez, who actually did pretty well in the public advocates race, and the former Speaker of the City Council of New York as of right now. Granted, all of this could change, but Melissa Mark Viverito is in 6th place at this moment, which is
incredible.
Unreal.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, Semelis is someone who's a grassroots housing advocate, and for her to be doing better than the former speaker of the council, this is exciting and promising.
And anything can happen now. We have a lot of mail-in votes that are going to be coming in. Again, the numbers are still very low, but if that is any indication, I don't see the numbers shifting drastically. For a lot of reasons, the way that the district's laid out, it's not like you have one area where it's a higher concentration of votes than another area. So that's Semelis, regardless of what happens, win or loss, she has shown that she is a stronger candidate than people who are sitting elected officials in that district or very close, who have very strong name ID and who everybody said, just to put this in perspective, Melissa Mark Viverito also ran in the public advocates race, and everyone was like, she's gonna win, she's gonna win, she's gonna win, and
she didn't do as well as other people thought she would. And I also think that once you're not in incumbent, once you're not in office, it's much harder for you to win a race. So yeah. It doesn't surprise me so much, but I am very pleased that Semelis is doing better than her.
Right. Alex, what are you saying on your end? You've been so quiet. You've been letting the ladies speak.
Yeah, well, I'm surrounded by people who know better than I do, and so I know better than to speak when I'm surrounded by people who know better than me. I'm still looking. I'm just trying to get as much information about this race that I'm watching right now with Melody's race, but I think we're just kind of sitting on it. The most recent thing that I saw was it was like 30. She was around 31%, but there's a lot of precincts that are not reporting right now, so I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna hear it tonight, which is kind of a bummer. But I'm gonna be sitting up watching it. I don't know. The thing about Long Island politics, and I would love to talk more about this maybe at another time, but it's a strange place. I think that once you start to get out here, it's not quite what everybody thinks. It went, Suffolk County went for Obama in 2008, and then in 2016 it went for Donald Trump by pretty much the same margin that it went for Obama. So it's very weird. And to give you sort of an idea of like what the politics are like of the typical politician out here, when Steve Israel was like the head of this district, his big thing that he would tout all the time consistently, and that he would, you know, show in his campaign ads for several years afterwards, was after Obama got into office, they were tinkering with the tax brackets, and he got the tax brackets moved up to like, he got like the top income bracket basically like moved up significantly, because the people, and a lot of the people inside of his district who are voting are making significantly more money, and that was his big thing, was that he got, you know, the tax bracket higher, and that was a big thing that he could kind of sell, you know. And something that Swazi's been talking a lot about, and also a lot of politicians out on Long Island, has been the SALT deduction. You know, they've been freaking out about the SALT deduction because it's been hitting their voters, their taxpayers, like really, really hard. So that's something that matters a lot to them. So I think no matter what happens with Dorigo's race, and I hope she wins, but no matter what happens with it, I think it's vital that we have people like her running progressive races in places like this and further out, because you need to be able to show people that we can run these progressive campaigns, we can get support, we can raise money, and, you know, just even to get it out into the universe, to get it inside of people's heads that they can run these races. Ingrid, I am a huge fan of Tiffany Caban. I was actually at her the election night. I was there at her party, and it was such a great energy, and I was so devastated.
Oh my God!
Like that was such a crazy. Like
it was up. That was like being on a roller coaster, right? We were at the very top, and then once she started, all the absentee ballots started to be counted. It was just heartbreaking, because I also worked on that race. I volunteered, I should say. And yeah, it was very disappointing, because we almost won that. It was just 55 votes. So yeah.
And you know, and like what just what people don't necessarily realize is the Board of Elections, the way that this is all structured, this is when we talk about the machine, even if the machine is falling apart, there's legacies of the machine. There are lawyers who represent the machine, and the candidates, this is something we haven't talked about, but candidates, when they're in these situations, how many candidates have come on tonight and said, yes, please send us donations if you can, because we might have to be tied up in court. And there are only so many lawyers out there who really have the experience of working through these systems, and they're all groomed by the machine. And it's a specific type of law. So if you have 50 challengers in New York, or 15, or 5, frankly, they don't have access to the best lawyers in this space, not because there aren't great lawyers out there, but because it's such a nuanced area of the law that has really been reserved for folks who are aligned with the machine. So that's, I mean, I looked at Tiffany's race and I was just like, I see what's going on there.
I think she had a top election lawyer, Jerry Goldfeder, and I think he's worked with a lot of, you know, quote unquote machine candidates. And so, you know, she was also a great fundraiser, Tiffany. So, you know, we were able to pay for Jerry Goldfeder's representation, and I think, you know, he did well. Unfortunately, we just came just this close to winning. So yeah.
I mean, it's a tough thing. It's a very tough thing. Go ahead, Alex. Sorry.
No, Dominique, I was going to say, this is also why we need, you know, lawyers on the left. Hopefully, like myself, I just actually finished law school, and I'm practicing out here. Although any of my comments do not reflect my employer. I'm working out here as a public defender, and so obviously I'm a huge fan of Caban. But this is definitely why we need these lawyers on the left, just like as a little side note or whatever, because of this like tremendous power structure. And I do, from organizing and stuff that I did when I was living in the city, it's very incestuous, especially with big law firms. And there are very powerful attorneys, not only who raise a lot of money for not not just obviously Republicans, but like centrist type candidates. There's a lot of money in that. But there's just kind of a revolving door in different ways between firms and then different positions, and New York politics is extremely incestuous. And, you know, you can look it up. I'm not going to name drop specific places, but like even, you know, the former counsel for Governor Cuomo, Alfonso David, who now is, I think, at the head of HRC or something like that. He, you know, like the firm that he was attached to, like they had a lot of lawyers who were involved in a lot of like mainstream Democratic races in New York, who also do like political lobbying in other races across the United States. So like it is this, when you talk about the machine, it sounds like this thing where you're like, oh, you know, whenever I say stuff like that to certain people, they look at me like I'm a crazy person. But like there is this machinery, right, that is spread out and kind of all encompassing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ingrid. No, go ahead. I was just going to give updates, so please feel free.
Oh yeah. No, I was just thinking about that whole title about the machine. You know, there is an argument to be made that DSA is one of these machines now, in which, you know, they have such powerful influence, and you know they're sort of kingmakers in some ways, and queenmakers, I should say. But they might not, you know, appreciate that title. However, you know, we see that their influence and power has grown, and they are pretty much a machine.
That is, I think that's a profound point. And, you know, even becoming a machine, which is good because you need that solidarity. We also, especially because it's happening so quickly, what's that old parable about like the frog being boiled doesn't realize it's being boiled, you know? We all have to be cautious of falling for the same ills, the same mistakes. And I don't know, and that's why I really wanted to have you on, Ingrid, because I've watched you, and whether or not I've expressed it or not, and this might be a very public forum to say it, but I feel like you've kept your consciousness about what really matters in the community, and there's a conscious behind your choices and your thoughts and your questions, and an awareness. And I think it's really important because we're working in politics, and politics, of course, attracts power, whether or not you get into it for the right reasons and eventually become a machine yourself. With that being said, I'm just going to go through some races real quick because, again, I just want to reiterate, the numbers being reported are confusing. We have a number of votes that are cast, but it doesn't seem to be indicative of the percentage based on any sort of electoral history, unless like every single person in these districts voted, which I'm going to guess is not. A good chunk of these votes have not been counted because of mail-in and probably won't be for several weeks, but there are some races where the margins are so big right now, or at least are important to pay attention to, that I want to run through. We have, so Jabari Brisbort, he's running for state senate in Brooklyn, and I mentioned that because he ran for council a few years ago and was probably the first, speaking of DSA, the first DSA candidate endorsed, and maybe even nationwide, at least in this iteration, post-Bernie. He was also Green Party. He had great movement, came up short. I adore Jabari. We try to get him on tonight, and he's like, I'm going to be at the polls talking to people. I can't do it. I wish I could. Had a lot of that, but he's a great guy. He is right now edging out Tremaine Wright, who's the incumbent, by how many votes? Almost 3,000 votes. So it's 52.3 to 40. That's a significant margin. Again, 0% reporting doesn't look. The percentage isn't. I think they're not putting the percentage in because they don't know the mail-in yet. So it's just staying at 0%. So some of the other races, and state senate is important because even though we got rid of the IDC and made the Senate, and what this means for the nation, having New York as a completely Democratic state with essentially a supermajority to challenge Governor Cuomo, who wants to run for president, that has implications nationwide. It's the media capital of the world, it's the finance capital of the world, but it is also a state that, you know, when California passes something, it has huge effects. Same thing with New York. And so it's why we need to have senators who are not just, you know, voting Democratic and running Democratic, but actually Democratic and progressive. And Jabari is a great inspiration. Some of these other races that I think are important to mention, and feel free to, Julia Salazar, also a DSA candidate. Oof, she is annihilating her opponent. I didn't even know she had an opponent, so I'll just put that out there. Michael Genaris, who's my senator, the deputy leader, he's in with 74%. I felt like he was going to do fine, but, you know, I think this is all important. I love Bernie. Obviously, I love Bernie. I work with him. I was on 2016. Bernie sent out an email supporting Senator Gianaris, raising him money, and I love Senator Gianaris. He's a friend of mine. He's my senator. Didn't really need the money for a lot of reasons. So I felt like, even our progressive leaders, we should probably ask them to do more for the candidates that really need it, who have real challenges, who are earlier on. So if he had sent that email for Smellies 2 weeks prior when he sent out the other email, how much would that have made a difference? These are really important questions we have to ask.
Absolutely. And I think, again, with Bernie's base and very supportive, very loyal base, I think that it makes such a huge difference, because that means, you can pay more canvassers, or you can, pay more ads on TV. And so absolutely, I think one of the things that's really impressive, Samelis, she drew up the numbers, and I think a week or so, she was at a higher level of donation than AOC was at the same time 2 years ago. And so, I think that AOC kind of, changed the game completely, because there would be no other candidates that are on the left that would have had that kind of, I guess, kind of courage. I feel like she really did inspire a lot of courage in all of us on the left, and say, what, it's possible. I can do this. And so I think that, there's something to be said about what you mentioned, that, if Senator Sanders had, endorsed earlier, it could have made a big difference in this race.
And, and I'll use my soapbox as long as I have it to say that. I feel like I've earned that privilege, having done the work for Bernie, to say, endorse people early. Okay, one other race, and if anybody has to go, I understand it's very late and it's been a long night, but I know people are tuned in, so I'm willing to stay on and go through some of these results, because we have good audience right now. Going back to the Carolyn Maloney district, we had Lauren on earlier, Lauren Ashcraft. That, again, these numbers are very low in terms of percentage, but the count's pretty significant, at least. Carolyn Maloney and Suraj Patel are actually getting much closer. They're about less than 600 vote difference right now in that race. It's 39.8 to 41.7. And I think, I've been in Arizona at my grandparents' house, for the audience who doesn't know. And I've been hearing the ads for Suraj and Carolyn like nonstop. And they're just, it's so petty. It's so, Suraj Patel had like some issues with women, and like, and Carolyn's throwing that at him, and he's calling her, Suraj Patel is calling her an anti-vaxxer. And it's just so, I mean, yes, those are all criticisms, but that's the basis of their campaign ads. Millions of dollars being put into them in some cases. And, this is a district that's one of the most unequal districts in the country. And that's what the debate is about?
That's right. Yeah. It's very sad that, that's happening, because again, that is an interesting district. You do have this huge income gap. And I feel like let's focus on the issues like getting Medicare for all, and like having, homes guarantee, and just making sure people stay in their homes. There are bigger fish to fry, and I'm saddened to hear that that's what was happening.
It's looking like the borough president's race it's really coming down to, it's tightening up a little bit between Crowley and Donovan Richards. I'm surprised by that. Elizabeth Crowley, who is the cousin of Joe Crowley. I actually didn't expect that. I thought that Costa would have edged out Elizabeth Crowley, but that name, people recognize that name. Let's see, any other? Jerry Nadler and Lindsey Boylan. He's got 16,000 votes in. She's got 6,000. He's at 62.4%. She's at 25. Some of these, my assembly district, and this is very controversial. I don't know if I'm ready to talk about this, but I think Ingrid knows where I'm going. My assemblywoman is Arabella Simotis. Is she as progressive as we would have wanted her to be, and I actually think she's become more progressive with the movement, just as Michael Gianaris has. In fact, she's probably more progressive than he was prior, and so I do think there's a little bit of sexism there. She was challenged from the left from a DSA candidate who is progressive, moved to the district recently, comes from significant wealth. Not that that should be a factor, but I do think it's important in terms of the district dynamics. And he is now, this is a very progressive district, and I think it was a little bit opportunistic for him to run in and run as a progressive with not having a deeper conversation. It doesn't mean that he's not going to be a great leader if he does get elected to assembly. I don't know. I feel icky about it.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, and I've been actually struggling a lot, with this race because of the fact that I do like Zoran a lot. I think he's, again, someone who's got a compelling story, and he does come from a lot of privilege, and moved into a community that, DSA knew the numbers were really good for them. And, they've poured a lot of resources into this race, and I wonder, though, how that's the sort of socialist message is going to be, how it will land, in Astoria. I do think that, there's a lot of young families, a lot of young people, and I think they're much more open to this whole idea of democratic socialism. But we will see. We'll see. And I think Zoran, again, he has a good shot. I think that they've poured so much into this that he has a good shot of winning and further putting this district to the left, further to the left.
And it's interesting. I mean, I live in Astoria. I'm Greek too, so it's weird. I'm like a DSA member and I'm Greek. I feel like it's a very. I feel like I'm tied between two families right now. I'm like but I do know Arabella, and I think she listens. I don't think excuses taking the money that she has in the past, but I just want to be very clear and fair. So have all these other candidates that are suddenly supported by DSA, that were in the establishment before, that are supported by Bernie Sanders. So she's just not as outward about it. She's if I can say it, she's an introvert. She, when you walk around with her in the district, everyone knows who she is. That's part of that community that's been there for years. She shows up to things, she listens, she talks in a very genuine way, but she's not the person who's taking, doing photo ops. And so it's tough for me. I mean, I'm really proud to say that I know before I ran for office, before I was involved in Bernie, I knew my elected officials personally. And I don't think a lot of people have that privilege in New York. And I'm very grateful that, I happen to live in a district where they're involved. I
mean, I think that's a good point you're making, because Aravella is someone who's been in that district for a long time. I don't know if it's all her life, but for a pretty long time.
She immigrated from Africa. Sorry.
Okay. Oh no, that's interesting. But I think it makes a difference, right? Because you are in the community. You have deep roots in the community, and then you have someone who kind of comes into the community, helicopters in, and says, "Yay, I'd like to run here." And, there's that too. Like, we have to see, well, you don't really have deep roots. You don't really know the community well. So why should we support you? And so that's something that, I think for the progressive left, I think we are grappling with that a lot. But I certainly prefer a progressive who comes from the community and understands the needs of that community. And that just, to me, is where my support would go.
I hear you. All right, let's see. What else are we seeing here? Alex, do you see anything? Kelly, I love Kelly's monitoring the show. For those of you who don't know Kelly, I feel like it's a moment where we have to bring Kelly back into the conversation. Kelly is the genius behind the scenes of the show, running everything. I don't know what you do. I don't know how to explain it. That's not going to bore people.
From my perspective, Nomiki's the genius behind the scenes. I'm just helping out with, the vehicle, which is YouTube. And I will put in the chat, which I've been, going in the chat as part of my thing for being a mod, how to support Nomiki via Patreon.
Oh, right, that's a thing.
Yeah, just watching the show and subscribing and liking the show and following the people who appear on the show on Twitter and kind of keeping up, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whichever you like. I mean, all of that supports the show because Nomiki has repeat guests. You know, she doesn't stop supporting people. So, you know, the show is just building right now, and I'm really excited about it. Thanks for having me on, Nomiki.
Yeah, and we're doing great tonight. I gotta say, like, you know, I think this is, after COVID especially, it's been pretty frustrating for everybody. So it's nice to see everybody, you know, jumping on and wanting to tune in. Go ahead.
Right out the gate, I was surprised at how many people, because it was like a last minute promotion and people stayed, like the numbers kept rising, and then Sam came and it like went up by 50%. The Sam Cedar bump. Yeah, he's famous now. It's crazy, you know, like someone that you don't respect becomes that. No, I'm just kidding.
Your words, not mine. I respect him.
Oh no, of course I respect him, but yeah, you know, it's great that you know, he's getting so much attention. You're on the show on Tuesdays, and
yeah,
I don't know.
So one other race I'm looking at, again, this is, especially with this race, we have to be very careful because I'm seeing people call it from already. Very few votes are in. Not even 6,000 votes are in right now. Is Mondaire, the 17th congressional district, Mondaire Jones. He is winning, but it's pretty tight still, and he's at 36.7%. Adam Schleifer, I don't know how to say his name, is below him, you know, by 7 points. And David Carlucci, who was a member of the IDC, got voted out. He is now running for Congress because that's what you do in New York. You get voted out and you're like, all right, I'm gonna go do this now. So, you know, we're not going to have a good sense of a lot of these races, as we said, for a few weeks. Alex, any news on Maloney's front? Because what makes me really interested in that race is, for the most part, it's a 1-to-1. And when we see these dynamics, it's like we said, there's a coalition behind, there's a unification behind one candidate, one progressive candidate. She is undeniably the progressive candidate in that race. I wish more love had been shown, personally, but she's doing decently well, right?
Yeah, sorry, apologies. Yeah, right now, I mean, it looks like, you know, she's still trailing Swazi, but there's not a lot coming in terms of reporting. But I am seeing some bold people on Twitter are trying to make calls right now for certain people for Jamal Bowman, but there's nothing like from a more reputable source. But it looks like he's up pretty handily with 30% reporting in.
Yeah, I mean it seems that way, but again, it's like we don't have. As Dominique said before she left, and this is the district she lives in, the Bronx is what seems to be reporting in, and in-person voting. So we have to be cautious. This stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the South Bronx, where I grew up, this very district, you will see a lot of people showing up at the polls, you know, because there's mistrust. You know, what will they do if I mail in my vote? Will it really count? So a lot of people go in person. I know when I made phone calls, there were several people who said to me, no, I got my ballot and I mailed it out. And those were the quadruple primes, those who did get their ballots sent to their homes. But I do have a sense that, like, we're gonna get closer to the results of this race based on the numbers for the in-person voting.
So I don't know what I have to tell you. I just saw this. I don't think this is accurate at all. But political polls on Twitter, oh no, that's not accurate at all. They made a mistweet saying that Lindsey Boylan was leading Jared Nadler, and it's just the opposite everywhere else I'm looking. So they got to fix that tweet. I was like, what? Did something happen last minute? One other race, just to pay attention to, that we've been talking about, is the Booker McGrath race. 50% in does not include mail-in ballots. We just have to keep saying that over and over again. Has McGrath in the lead at 45% to 36%. Again, this could turn so fast with mail-in ballots, especially with the last-minute bump. So if people mailed in their ballots today, the last couple of days, that could make a huge, 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 huge difference in these races. So we'll just have to do the show until July 20th. No, I'm kidding.
Every night.
Every night, I will. Kelly's like, yeah. Like, no.
I chime in about a race we haven't talked about.
Of course.
Which is District 35 with Jeffrey Aubrey and Hiram Montserrat.
Yes.
So
wait. Can we give a background on Hiram Montserrat just so the world knows?
Okay, so Hiram Montserrat is a disgraced politician from Corona, East Elmhurst, Queens, and basically he took monies from I believe it was his campaign. No, he took monies he gave to a not-for-profit for his campaign. So he was funneling that money and using it for his, political purposes. And he was convicted and he spent 2 years in jail. And then he was thrown out of the Senate because he had he cut his girlfriend's face with glass. And so, yes, he has run this is the 6th time that he runs. And right now, what it's looking like is that Jeffrey Aubrey has 65.65%, and Hiram Montserrat has 33.94%. So it looks like Jeffrey Aubrey will be winning this. Also, I want to say that Jeffrey Aubrey got AOC's endorsement just a few days ago. It was, I think, Friday of last week. So, I'm interested in seeing, how much her influence got him over the top. So that's something to think about too.
I was looking at another race. This hasn't had really any attention, which is also a factor here. If you can kind of run in the shadows while all this other stuff is happening and not get a lot of attacks on you. She's not like a progressive hero, but I'm paying attention to it because she had run in a race prior in a different part of New York. But Jennifer Rajkumar is running for assembly, and I just lost it on screen, but she beat the incumbent, which is a huge deal in a machine district.
Well, yeah, I mean, that district too is, I think, minority district. And I think Mike Miller, it's also a low turnout district. So I'm not sure what the numbers are that you're seeing, Nomiki. But I'm not so surprised. I know she's poured in a lot of money and resources. It's been a very interesting race to watch with the back and forth between her and Joey DeJesus.
Wait, let's Joey DeJesus. Can we describe?
Yeah, so Joey DeJesus is a queer poet who, could be considered a Twitter troll. He would definitely, troll Jennifer Rajkumar. And I'm probably going to lose a lot of friends for saying that, but that's okay. I just think that, one of the issues I had with Jennifer was that she was taking money from Raytheon and from Hindu nationalists. And so a lot of people were pissed off. They were pissed off, like, why is she doing this? Like, how can we support you if you're supporting Hindu nationalists? And why are you taking Raytheon money? So I think, I'm not so surprised that Jennifer did well, and that it's sort of time that Mike Miller retire. That's my opinion. But yeah, I hope that she considers, either giving back some of that money or investing it in some other cause, right? Because I think the left wants to see that happening. So that's
I agree. I think that's accurate. There was an opportunity there because he was so vulnerable, and she saw it and she was able to seize on that. With that being said, Paperboy Poet, can we talk about him? I'm not on the Paperboy train.
You don't want the $1,000 a month, Nomiki?
Exactly, because I'm a socialist, and I don't buy into the Yang Gang BS. But let's talk a little bit about. I mean, he's fascinating as a candidate.
Right. He is. He's, I think too, he's a rapper, and he's got this very colorful personality, and he's always wearing these very sort of bombastic sort of, outfits.
Beautiful.
But I actually did look at his website, and it has some really interesting points. He's he's also a little bit facetious. I don't know if facetious is the right word, but he says love is a revolution, and he wants to promote love, and like, which I think is beautiful. But the other things that he was promoting is the Yang Gang thing, the $1,000 a month or more. And I think, for people that, are affected, who lost their jobs due to COVID-19, I think that makes sense. I think that having that income really helps. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to watch that race, but I know that Nydia Velasquez is going to win.
And in terms of the spectrum of New York politics, she's she's definitely on the left of comparatively to the rest of New York politicians. She's, in terms of Puerto Rico, like, I think we know this, she is for independence, which is a pretty radical, not radical on the island, but like radical for Americans to understand that, like, she's not pro-statehood, which is let's just remind everybody, that's a right-wing thing. Like, somehow it's gotten into the Democratic Party. So, on some issues, she's very far to the left. But I didn't feel like there was a lot of depth to his campaign, and there's this dynamic. Maybe this is for another conversation for another day, and I'm sure Alex has thoughts on this too. I feel like the gang was like people who want to feel left, but like still want to be a little capitalist and don't want to go deep in and don't want to pick up any Marx and read it. It's just it's like very. I feel like it's a little superficial. And Yang is running for mayor, it looks like.
Oh, okay. That should be interesting. I get what you're saying. And I think that there has to be a more deeper conversation about the kind of economy we want. Because you're right, this is sort of like, okay, it's great. You get $1,000, but what else are we going to do? How else are we going to build our economy, especially now after COVID-19 with, I don't know if it's like 40 million Americans who've lost their jobs. That's a heck of a lot of Americans who lost their jobs. So yeah, we do need to see sort of a more robust plan to really see what the economy will look like, post COVID-19.
If I could interject about.
Yes, please.
I like Paperboy. I mean, like, he's not my guy, and I like his flair, I believe Paperboy is non-binary, which is also cool. Yeah, I think that the UBI stuff and like Yang, I'm glad that like we're having a conversation about UBI. I think that's a good thing, and I think we should be talking. Not necessarily the way I think Yang couches it, or a lot of candidates that have kind of like followed his lead. Like Shavana Newsom, who's actually a friend of mine who's running in the Bronx. One of her like platform planks was kind of like UBI in the Yang kind of way. And I think that basically just because that became like a digestible thing. It was like, okay, we understand what this is, but obviously we're not actually talking about the nuts and bolts. And I don't like trying to make things, needlessly complicated in terms of like explaining them as like, political, whatever, selling political ideas. But it really definitely felt like Yang's UBI is definitely super half-baked. And it was kind of like, okay, cool, you're going to have $12,000. Or these other candidates are like, great, you're going to have this money, but you're still going to go bankrupt because, you can't, insurance is ridiculously expensive, or you're going to go to the hospital for something and it's going to, look at all these people with COVID. I mean, going and leaving with, hospital bills that are massive. So yeah, I'm also extremely, I don't really think it's a great idea.
It reminds me of pork. It's like modern day pork, in my opinion. Taking pork back to the district. Look at I got you the bridge that you've been complaining about for 25 years. I've fixed the potholes you've been complaining about for like, oh, shouldn't you reelect me? I did this for your district. You don't even see pork anymore in the neoliberal experiment, and so I think that's what he was able to tap into, which is people are hurting, and so. We love the idea of having some sort of basic income, but that's not basic income, not based on any reality of what the standards of living and expenses are in this country. And I feel like, I respect Paperboy. I hope he stays in politics. I think he's got great they have great game, I should say. But like, I urge you to take it further. And I know I'm going to get annihilated on Twitter for this, but you know what? I'm old and I earned it. All right, guys. So I don't want to keep you all night, but it seems like we sort of have a good sense of where we are right now. Nicole Maliotakis is going to be facing Representative Max Rose in Staten Island. She ran for mayor. She's one of the few Republicans in the city of New York. She's Greek. I'm not proud of that. She's right-wing. And Max Rose is a pretty centrist conservative Democrat who's based in Staten Island, so that's an interesting one. Bowman and Engel. Bowman is based on right now, he's in at 64%. That's phenomenal. So we'll see what happens. Well, again, anything, we've all seen it before. Anything can happen. Parting words, y'all. Gotta.
Yeah, I would say, you know, this has been an exciting election cycle because, you know, nobody expected us to be in the middle of a global pandemic and still continue with campaigns. And so I really commend all the candidates for sticking it out. It looks like the indications are that a lot of challengers we're going to win. So again, I think it's a fantastic showing that, you know, many people did send in their ballots. Many people did show up to vote. And democracy is alive and well and robust. And I'm proud to be alive now watching all this happen.
Love it. Ingrid, where can people find your work?
So people can find me on Twitter at Ingrid P. Gomez and on Facebook as well, Ingrid Gomez.
And Quip, how can we?
Yes. So Quip also has a Twitter page. It's at Quip_club and on Facebook, Quip Club.
It's a Queens-based organization for those of you guys just tuning
Queens
in.
United Independent Progressives. Thank you, Nomiki.
Of course. Alex?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. You had a great panel, and I feel super lucky to have been invited. So thank you so much. I guess my parting words are, hey, there's hope on Long Island. There's hope out here, okay? It's not all bad. We do good stuff. We work hard. We try to organize. You know, it's been a crazy time, especially with everything that's going on with the protests and, you know, people fighting, really kind of having their voices heard and fighting back against police brutality. And honestly, there's a lot of racism out on Long Island. You know, in Merrick, we had some protesters get stopped, but then a couple days later, because of organizing and because of the pressure from social media, we were able to get like 4,000 people to come out in Merrick and march, which is for Long Island is a really big deal. Just to come out into Merrick and have thousands of people, you know, saying Black Lives Matter is a really important thing. And we did the same thing, not as big, but we did the same thing in Smithtown when there was a protester who actually got physically assaulted after a protest. So like there are people out here who are fighting this fight, but we're like I think we're still figuring out how to come together like cohesively and work together as activists and like different community organizers, because we need that power kind of together. And there are a ton of really cool people doing really great work who like I'm hoping to connect with more over time. Like I just basically, this is my home where I grew up. So I'm like coming back here to work as a public defender, but also like I want this place to be a more progressive place that I think is like more reflective of the values that a lot of people here actually have, but they don't always vote. So I think that's really possible out here. You know, Melanie Dorigo's campaign is an important campaign. She's, you know, still trailing Swazi right now, and we'll see how it works out. But I think those campaigns are really important, and I encourage people to run and to do them, and I think it's super great. Yeah, so that's it. You know, it's not all bad out here. It's not. We got good stuff going on out here.
You do, and you have I think what was so engaging about Melanie was she recognized there's a working class that's getting erased on Long Island that responds, and we saw that a few years ago at the special election of Christine Pellegrino. She ended up getting defeated because Republicans were like, oh, no, we're coming after you. She's got the nomination for Senate right now. That's in November, so it's, you know, it's not a priority, like at least tonight. But, you know, she was a teacher, and there's more teachers in Long Island than anywhere else in the state. And so it doesn't mean that they always line up for being Democratic, but if you mobilize them on those issues like saving education, you can suddenly bring in the independents and Republicans who are teachers. So if we talk more based on those, meeting people where they are rather than like whatever the DCCC's been doing or Swazi's been doing, we might be able to move more votes. Kelly, thoughts?
I'm just always so happy to meet the people that are on the show. I mean, like virtually meet them usually because I'm usually just watching, but I mean, go find them on Twitter and then hear everything they have to say. Everyone's so impressive and I'm just sort of watching. But I appreciate everything that you guys do as activists. It's really inspiring. And I'm glad to be a part of the show. Nomiki is an activist as well.
Thank you. So I just want to give a shout out to everyone who's been on the show. If you guys can roll with me for the credits from my mouth. Thank you to Lindsey Boylan running against Jerry Nadler, Lauren Ashcroft running against Carolyn Maloney, and Suraj Patel now. Melanie Dorigo, who's running against Tom Swazi. Mel Garrigan, who is, what is his district number again? He's running against Grace Meng. I can't remember. 12?
I think it's, no, I think 6. New York, 6. No, 5. New York 5 or 6.
Keep track. Queens. Grace Meng, most conservative member in New York City, next to Tom Swazi, who has a slice of New York City. And for those who have been on the show who are trying to make it this week, who are candidates, Semelis Lopez, who is in the Bronx, we're watching her closely. We're cheering for her matriarch candidate. Thank you to Dominique Shumanova, who is the political director of Matriarch, for sticking it through with the baby, with her leg. She just had leg surgery. She really stuck it out. I'm very proud of her for doing that. And thank you to Monica Zaman, who was working in the race in the Bronx and in Westchester. And Ingrid Gomez, of course, with Quip. And of course, I can never say his last name, Gara Grigoris, who was running against Engel up until June 1st and consolidated again behind Jamal Bowman. And to Amanda Frankel, who was running against Nadler and consolidated against Nadler with Lindsey Boylan at this point. And she's now working for Reach, doing incredible work there. Who am I missing? Alex Clavering, right? Is that the right way of saying it?
Yeah, that works.
That works. Okay. And Sam Cedar, who's not on my rundown because he just surprised us. I think that is everyone. And Mondaire Jones, who's supposed to make it tonight, but crazy turn of events. Turns out he's doing very well as of right now, so I understand why. That is the crazy thing about these nights, is you just don't know what to expect. If you are not already and you're still on here, click subscribe, like, share. Join us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. We do a lot of inside the Democratic Party, inside the machine. That's our jam. These events of the last few weeks have shifted things a bit, but that is essentially who we are. We live for these moments. And what is your dog's name, Kelly?
Edie.
What is it?
Edie.
Yiddy?
Edie.
Oh, Edie. Bijou, it left me. My dog Bijou was whining for like half the show and he escaped. But just want to thank you all for your incredible work. Shout out to all the candidates and challengers and folks that we didn't touch on. Can't wait to deliver the results. Hoping that democracy comes through in this election. And George, thanks to George, who's the blank screen on here.
Oh my gosh, that's been George all along?
George works at our show, and Dorsey, who's moving, members of our team. Thank you to you all. We love you. Check out the show this week. We're going to go live tomorrow with our brand new show, and it's the new one's up on Patreon right now. Definitely come get the swag. We've got swag now. George has that too. We'll be sharing that link online if you want to get some swag. We have stickers, mugs, and totes. Gotta sell yourself on these shows. It's insane. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Let's win this. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.